Well, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Welcome to the 2023 Black History Month event. I'm Dan Carreño, the NOC-WD Executive Director, and also the African American Pipelines Advisory Team, WD champion. And I'm also joined and welcomed by our NAVAIR National APAT champions, which you're going to hear from them shortly or through the program. So it's great to be here, great to be in person. It's also great to be virtually with our nationwide NAVAIR team. So hopefully things are all transmitting across okay, but thanks to our great technical teams across the country that are making this possible. But again, it gives me a lot of energy and enthusiasm to see you all here. And so thanks for being here. We have a great program today, Inspiring Change. And we are blessed to have Captain Ike Glover here with us. And so first and foremost, it's kind of like a welcome home, because he was with VX-31 and with NOC-WD for a couple of years. So really cool NASA stuff, but he's a weapons guy too. So that's why we let him in. And but anyway, it is absolutely wonderful to be here, spending some time with him yesterday afternoon and evening at VX-31, little social event. He got to speak to a lot of our air crew testers like he was in his previous days. And I tell you, he's got a lot of stories, how he's going to condense it just to the limited time here. But I could think of no one better just with the time that we spent for talking about inspiring change. So I'm really looking forward to the program today. Really important and really great to have these opportunities to celebrate diversity and how diversity makes us a strong NAVAIR team and connects us all. And so for more on that, I would like to introduce our NAVAIR commander, Vice Admiral Carl Chevy.
Hello, Team NAVAIR. Vice Admiral Carl Chevy here. Welcome and thank you for participating in today's event. These events are very important as they provide us an opportunity to celebrate the diversity that makes us a stronger Navy and nation. History has taught us that winning teams treat each other with dignity and respect. Winning teams value the unique perspectives, skills, and differences each individual brings to the team. NAVAIR's three core values start with the fleet, change the game, and win with inclusion and respect are foundational to our ability to deliver the warfighting capability the fleet needs. Let me focus on our core value of win with inclusion and respect. We derive tremendous strength from working together as teams of diverse individuals united by a common mission. Leveraging our full workforce, our different backgrounds, experiences, and beliefs is instrumental to our success and provides us new insights and perspectives on how we can best deliver the warfighting capability the fleet needs at a cost we can afford. Team NAVAIR, I encourage you to participate in today's great conversation, to listen and to really think about how you can apply these lessons in your workplace. We are better together when we foster an inclusive, respectful, and collaborative environment with our entire NAVAIR workforce. We ensure our sons and daughters have the capability they need to execute their mission successfully and return home safely. Team NAVAIR, we are one team, one fight.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to this year's Black History Month event. My name is Adrienne Somerville, and I am the Deputy Director of the Command Operations Group. Additionally, I am the African American Pipelines Advisory Team's Executive Champion. A native of California and fellow naval aviator, Captain Victor J. Glover, Jr. was a test pilot in the FA-18 Hornet, Super Hornet, and EA-18G Growler. Captain Glover was selected as an astronaut in 2013 while serving as a legislative fellow in the United States Senate. He most recently served as a pilot and second in command on the Crew-1 SpaceX Crew Dragon named Resilience, which landed May 2nd, 2021. It is the first post-certification mission of SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft, the second crewed flight for that vehicle, and a long-duration mission aboard the International Space Station. He also served as flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expedition 64. He contributed many things while aboard the station, including scientific investigations, technology demonstrations, growing crops, and taking hundreds of pictures of Earth. He completed 168 days in orbit and participated in 4 spacewalks. Captain Glover has many accolades and awards. Just to name a few: the Defense Superior Service Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, 2 Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals, NASA Distinguished Service Medal, and the NASA Space Exploration Medal. Please give the Honorable Captain Victor J. Glover Jr. the warmest welcome. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. We are simply thrilled to have you and excited to hear your message.
Thank you. Thank you. I cannot express what I'm feeling right now. I'm going to try, though. It is great to be home. Somebody said that, coming home. Thank you, Mr. Carreño. Thank you to Admiral Chevy and to all of you here. It's a work day, like it's Tuesday. So I know there's a lot that's not happening with the person hours that are in this room right now. It is great to be here. It is awesome to come back to China Lake. I've been back once right after I finished astronaut candidate training, which my friend, my colleague, and fellow naval aviator Jessica Whitner, who also is a former Dust Devil, she flew out with me. And it's just great to be back. And I'm committing to you all right here, right now, that I'm going to do this more often. Things are slowing down now that I'm on the other side of that mission. And so I'll be back to visit more frequently because it's great to be here. Gosh, and we're leaving today, so we're not even going to really spend a lot of time. And I want to come back when I can really spend some time with you all. This is really a treat. And, I know I'm here to be the Black History Month speaker. I did this in, I believe, 2008. And it was an honor. It was great. It's a privilege. I hadn't flown to space then, so I think I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about my journey to space and going to NASA. And then I really, though, for me, I do this a lot. The part that is interesting to me is not this story I'm about to tell you. I've told it thousands of times. It's the opportunity to hear from you. The stories that you tell, the questions that you ask are what makes this really interesting and memorable for me. So get those questions ready, and I will give you a little bit of motivation. If you don't have questions for me, I'm going to ask you questions. So there will be a quiz at the end of this. All right. And to all the folks out there online, thank you for joining. I know we got some folks watching via Teams. I'm really glad we're able to stream this. It's nice to see technology working, but as Mr. Carreño said, it's also nice to see you in 3 dimensions. That's also something we should not take for granted. So with that, let's get started. And they told me I had a lot of time, so I'm going to take it. So get comfortable. I hope those chairs are comfortable. Start that one for me, would you? I love that video. It's a great way to get started. It's very motivational. And there's a picture in there of my whole class, my astronaut candidate class, back in 2014 in a zero-G flight. And so we're all floating in the center of the aircraft, hugging. Like, I love that. That's when we were new. And so it's interesting. Like that time has flown by. It's been a long time. All of us have flown in space, are currently flying in space now, which is super special. All right, so I'm going to walk you through this journey I call my journey to space. And again, my goal is to get to the question and answer, share some things with you that have been meaningful for me, and then I do want to come back and tie it to the Black History Month theme. If you haven't read the Navy's message, I believe it's an all nav for the Navy's theme for Black History Month for 2023. You should read it, the whole thing, not just the intro that tells you the theme so you know what to put on the memos, but read it. It has a little bit of our history, some special history about our organization, the Navy, the Department of the Navy. And there's some people in there that you may recognize, but even more important, if you don't know any of those names, you ought to. And so I encourage you to go read that. It's a short read, but it's chock full of really good information. And I want to come back and honor this. I'm going to talk about space and my experience, but I think it connects to the theme, and I'll come back to that at the end. But I want to start with this. I want to tell you, I've been doing Black History Month talks for a very long time. Before I was an astronaut, one of the first ones I was invited to do was here at my alma mater, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, right over the grapevine. This is how I not only try to live my life. This is a message that I think is important when we start talking about Black History Month. We should go. I'm a big believer in primary sources, first sources, and principles, basic principles. What's the physics? Tell me the physics of a thing. Tell me what the author said, not what the journalist wrote about the author. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's ground truth, and then there's everything else. And I don't like speculation. I like data. And so this is from the man who started what was then called Negro History Week. Negro History Week. And there's a kind of a joke out there. I may be helping some of y'all out. The joke that, yeah, we got Black History Month in February because it's the shortest month of the year. Actually, Dr. Carter Woodson chose, it was a week-long celebration all around the country. And he chose the weeks between the birthdays of Lincoln and one of my favorite people in history, Frederick Douglass. A man born a slave who, when he died, was an advisor to a president and brought about the eradication of slavery. An amazing person. If you haven't read about him, also go read about him. He wrote his own story, and it's amazing. But I love this statement, and I think this is important. This inspired how I trained for and flew my mission on the space station. We should emphasize not Negro history. Now, this is from the person who started Negro History Week. So this shouldn't be controversial. We should not emphasize Negro history, but the Negro in history. What I'm about to tell you and share with you, NASA wanted to make it about me being the first black man to live on the space station. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. This is our story. There's enough things dividing us. I want it to be something that brings us together. Let's just go up there, have a great mission, and act like we've been here before, because we have. We should emphasize the Negro in history. What we need is not a history of selected races or nations, but a history of the world void of national bias, race hate, and religious prejudice. He wrote that himself. So when we talk about this month and what it's supposed to do, it's to make sure we're telling the whole story. I could talk about this the whole hour that we're here, but I won't. Okay, so we'll get into talking about some space, my journey to space. Somebody mentioned it earlier. I'm from Southern California. I grew up in Pomona and went to Ontario High School, graduated from there, went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And a lot of significant things in my life have happened on the West Coast. I trained for my space mission here at Hawthorne. I became a test pilot at Edwards. I was a test pilot here. I learned to fly the F-18 at Miramar Marine Corps Air Station. I have some really interesting aerospace connectivity to California. Very special place to me. And so that's one of my earliest pictures, but I just love showing it because I had hair back then. So this is me here, this is my Easter suit. But again, a picture from back when I had hair. You may notice a theme. Oh, I'm sorry, we double did it there. Go back. I want to show off that hair. Go back. Easter suit, afro. Yeah, I miss that hair. I miss that hair. My mother is God bless her. I'm from SoCal. This is, my dad and stepmom live in Texas now, not far from us in Dallas, but my mom still lives in Southern California. And I told her, like, Mom, it's a quick get out. I'm going back to Houston as soon as we're done. And she's like, that's okay, baby. I'm coming up. So she's on the freeway right now. She's driving here. And I tell you what, though, that love, that support, she's like, if I knew how to drive to the space station, I would have met you in low Earth orbit. And I really believe that. Like, no kidding. My mom is on the freeway right now. Phil, don't, mom will be here soon. Thank you, brother. But that love and support is what got me. Forget here. Like, this is bonus. We're in bonus territory, man. It's what got me to the beginning, like to the point where I even had options. I'll talk some more about that. So I owe everything to my mother and my father. And so these pictures just put me back. I've got a picture of her up here too, but we'll get into that. So I'm just going to tell you a few stories that were like major rudder steers in my life. I had a teacher in 5th grade, Mr. Hargrove, my science teacher. I would sit in the back of his classroom and I would finish my homework and I would talk to my neighbors. I was that kid. I don't know if other people, will admit to that in public. I know your bosses may be watching, but I was that kid. And so he noticed the trend though, like it wasn't just goofing off. I would finish my work. And so he said a few things that changed my life. He was like, listen, why don't you go around and instead of just socializing, why don't you check in with your classmates and see if they need help? Because I was getting it done and I was doing it right. Science and math have always spoken to me, especially math. I like math. I speak math. And so he was like, check in with that put a seed in my head of like service and helping people, starting with my peers. And I think that it had started in 5th grade and it never ended. And then he also did something. Now, okay, Ryan, I need your help on this one. You're just going to have to do this for me because I want it to work. I don't want my remote to screw this up. Mr. Hargrove says to me, you're really good in this math and science stuff. One day, you might, if you can focus and really grow that gift, you might become an engineer. Go ahead. I'm glad you laughed because that is an emotional story. I didn't know what an engineer was. I thought he was talking about driving trains. I had no clue what math and driving trains had in common, but I was like, you know what? His belief in me inspired me. And it said another bit. There's a seed planted. I have 3 engineering degrees now because of that man, because of that conversation, because of that moment. If any of you are teachers or do outreach, thank you for your service. And I want to encourage you, keep setting those bars high. You know what? Everybody in this room, it doesn't matter what you do. You inspire and motivate and mentor somebody. Set high expectations. Give people a chance to rise to them. That he did that for me with no reason. I don't know if y'all have been to Pomona. I went to Allison Elementary School. We'll drive by my school today. It's in the hood. We didn't stop the spray painting. We just called it art. Okay? So he didn't have any reason to believe that this little kid could be an engineer. But he said that to me. And even though I thought he meant driving trains, I was like, you know what? Let's try to see what this is about. I might be able to do that thing. And so a lot of emotion. It's funny now, but I didn't know what an engineer was. My parents didn't go to college. I didn't know any engineers or pilots. And so, somebody's going to ask me, why did I become an engineer? I'll tell you that story as well when we get to it. High school, I had another teacher very similar to that. His name is Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson also did something that changed my life. Now, between these, there are lots of stories, chock full. I could tell you a bunch of stories. I'm gonna try to keep it brief. I'm gonna stay on schedule. We're gonna get out of here on time. Well, maybe not. That's okay. We're gonna try to get out of here on time. So, I am a pretty regular high school student, right? I'm 16. I want to be like Marcus Allen. That was about as far. When I was in Israel last week telling kids in Arabic and Hebrew to dream big, okay, at 46. At 16, my dream was to go to the University of Southern California to be a Trojan to play football like Marcus Allen. Now, to me, that was big. But that was as far. So when I tell you, like, I'm on borrowed, this is icing. I have gone way beyond the dreams I had for myself. I'm being honest with you. Okay, I didn't dream big enough. So when I'm telling people, like, no, trust me. When you think you have it, fold that thing up and then write on a bigger piece of paper. Okay? I'm not gonna get into the lessons yet. I'm just gonna keep telling you stories. So I'm a pretty normal dude, I think, right? These are some of my best friends to this day, Pam and Major. I played football. I wrestled. I loved football. I told you I wanted to be like Marcus Allen. That was my dream. But I was a much better wrestler, so I'd wind up going to college on a wrestling scholarship. But sports, academics were were okay. They were important to me. But sports and my friends were like non-negotiable. But I still spoke math. I love math. Math, and more important, math has always spoken to me. And so I was working on some homework in Mr. Robinson's class, and we had it was adding up numbers from 1 to n. And I noticed a pattern. If you drew them as a shape instead of a numbers, you could make them into a rectangle. And how do you find the area of a rectangle? You go length times width. How do you find the area of a triangle? 1/2 length times width, or height. And I noticed this pattern. And I was like, wait, if I want to add up the numbers from 1 to 4, or 1 to 10, I take that number 10 and I add 1, 11. 10 times 11 divided by 2. It was the area of the triangle. If you took that triangle, made it into a rectangle, and then found the length times width, and then cut it in half. And it was consistent. See, math was speaking to me. Now, I didn't always do my homework. If I had a big wrestling tournament the next day, I would do as much as I could until I was ready to go to sleep, and I would go to sleep. But this homework I was into. I got up, went to school the next day. I'm in the classroom in that 5-minute period between classes when most of us are in the hallways socializing, and I was usually out there too, but I was in his class drawing this up. This changed my life. I drew this on the board. Mr. Robinson comes in. It was much messier. If you've seen my handwriting, you know what I'm talking about. And were chalkboards for you young people, okay? There was no smart board. We didn't even have dry erase. It was chalk, and I had written on all of them to get to this. And he walked in and he looked at it. He said, "Did you figure this out?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And I had, you see the smile? I felt the same way then. I love telling this story because I always feel the same way I felt standing in the classroom. I was like, "Yes, sir. Pythagoras ain't got nothing on me." I had a name and everything. I was like, Glaverian theorem or the Victorian theorem? I think Glaverian is probably better, I had a name picked out for what I had discovered, and he goes into our analysis book and turns the page and shows me. I clearly hadn't finished all the homework because I hadn't gotten to the end where this formula was. But so he pointed out to me, and I was like, "Oh, dang." And he was like, "Well, you know what, Victor? Why don't you teach this today? Why don't you teach this to your classmates?" And see, what I didn't tell you was I wanted to go to college and play football, but I didn't really know if I could handle the academic part of college, right? My mom didn't graduate from college. My dad didn't graduate from college. So I didn't have anybody in my house to like ask those questions or to just assume that context away. And so it wasn't a foregone conclusion. It would be through grind and support, but I didn't know. And I wasn't confident in my ability academically. So this day changed that a little bit. I took a step in that direction of like, okay, maybe I can do this college thing. Maybe. We'll see. So I would eventually graduate and go on to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And again, like, math speaks to me. I'm studying engineering. I played football. I actually went on a wrestling scholarship, but I walked out for the football team because, well, damn it, I said I wanted to play football and I was going to try to play college football. And I got the chance. And I had two amazing coaches, Linus Cowell and Andre Patterson, two great men who, at the beginning of both seasons, they said, I am not here to make you great athletes. I'm here to help you develop into men. And they both truly lived up to those words. To this day, Linus Cowell is one of my best friends and a mentor, and still a major influence in my life, my wrestling coach. And he hasn't coached Cal Poly wrestling in a lot of years, but he's a great influence. And I put Phi Beta Sigma up there because I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Blue Phi. And we didn't plan that, by the way, but that's just how we roll. Because in 1996, I joined this organization. I came to college and I was just like, man, I'm get this degree, I'm gonna play, I'm gonna serve, do what I want to do, and maybe design cars. And I was talking to some other young men, and they were talking about these fraternities, and I was like, man, I'm not into that, but I was, service was very important to me. And they were like, all right, well, we're gonna do this outreach program and do this service. We're gonna collect some shoes, blankets, clothes for folks in town. Come with us. And I was working with them on several projects. And it was during one of these projects they were having a conversation that, again, changed my life. They were talking about raising money to give scholarships. Now, I'm 19, okay, and I'm on a wrestling scholarship, but that covers tuition, which was $700 a quarter back then. So, well, I don't know, it's a bajillion dollars to go to college now, but $700 a quarter, $2,100 a year was tuition. Room and board was like $10,000, so college was much more affordable. back in the Stone Age. And so these guys were talking about how to collect enough money to give $500 book scholarships to other students. And I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, okay, wait. These other 19 and 20-year-old dudes are having a discussion about how they're going to raise money to give it away to other people. And I was like, wow. So, you know, this theme of like helping your peers, helping others, has always been there through my life. That has been a thread running through my life story. And that is the beginning of my joining that organization. Because our motto is culture for service, service for humanity. I actually thought about that a lot and wrote about it a lot while I was in space. While I was in college, I met this young lady, Deanna. That's my now wife, Deanna Glover. And we used to spend a lot of time. That's how we started dating. We would drive all over California doing outreach through a program called MESA, Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Achievement. We would talk to kids about how to build bridges. But instead of just like handing them curriculum sheets, we would build bridges in the room. I made a big model that we can move pieces around and see what happens if you change the design of your truss. Where do those forces go? What happens if you push here, push here? Like I made it real for them. And let me tell you, 6th graders can do calculus, investment casting, and basic engineering structures if you give them the right tools. And they blew me away. My grade point average went up when I started doing this because I had to explain what I was learning in college to a 5th grader, a 6th grader, and 9th grader. And it meant I had to learn it first well enough. But then it also, lessons, I'm gonna stick to the facts right now. But that's what we were doing in college, and so that's how I met her. And but eventually, you know, as all things do, that part of my life would come to an end, and I graduated because that's what I went there for, and she was very happy. That's my mama. That's Cynthia, my mom. That's my little brother who is now an Army paratrooper. Obviously, my influence didn't work. I'm like, bro, land the planes. He wanted to jump out the planes. Who jumps out a perfectly good aircraft? But that guy, he's not that small anymore. But so graduated in 1999. I had actually joined the Navy. I joined the Navy in 1998. And while I was in college, Cal Poly didn't have an ROTC program. And so we had a program called BDCP, Baccalaureate Degree Completion Plan. And it was kind of like an ROTC scholarship for schools that did not have ROTC programs. And so I was very fortunate. And I'm going to tell you a story too. So, so I'm sitting, I got to tell you 2 stories to tell you this story. So I'm 16 years old. I told you I wanted to play football. In college, I wanted to be like Marcus Allen. I was a decent athlete. The Marine Corps gave me a scholarship. I was the male athlete of the year at Ontario High School. And the Marine Corps gave me a scholarship for that. Well, that started a series of events, and so the military was reaching out to me, and the Marine Corps was like, yeah, come be a Marine, hard charge, hoorah. And I was like, no, thank you. And the Navy sent a recruiter to my house. I actively mentor some kids. I got a kid into the Naval Academy right now. We work through that process, long process. So it's every time I go through this with somebody, it reminds me of this story. The Naval Academy sent somebody to my house to ask me if I wanted to play football at Annapolis. Do you know how much? That's like 2 years of work that I didn't have to do if I just said yes. And I said no. So actually, I got to tell you a 3rd story about my childhood. So I grew up in Pomona. Anybody know Pomona? What do you know about Pomona? Besides the fact that I'm from there. And sugar-free. Me and sugar-free. Besides me and sugar-free, what do you know about Pomona? You went to Cal Poly Pomona? That's the nice part. I'm from a part called Sintown. Have you ever heard of Sintown? It's a neighborhood it's a housing project. It's surrounded by a brick wall. Whether to keep stuff out, I don't know. It's probably to keep stuff in. But I bounced back and forth between there and like Baldwin Hills in Los Angeles. We lived in a part of Los Angeles that had a nickname. It was called the Jungle. It was great. Lived in some really great places, huh? Well, in that time, there was this there are a lot of unwritten rules in life, right? One of the unwritten rules, you actually see it in a movie. If any of you have seen the movie Boys in the Hood, there's a movie called Boys in the Hood. It's actually very good. I suggest you watch it. It is what my childhood was like in the 80s. And there's a scene in there. Lawrence Fishburne, Broadway actor, award-winning actor, was the father. Furious Styles is his name, and that's what they call him because he cuts hair. And his son is the 3rd, so he calls him Trey. They're sitting on the beach, like Venice Beach or something, and he's talking to him, giving him the rules, talking to him about girls, and he says, Trey, never go in the Army. There's no place for a black man in the Army. Well, he had just put words to a feeling that I grew up with. And I can't tell you why. I hadn't done any research. It was an anecdote. It's maybe one of the reasons why I love data so much now. I try to put data behind my anecdotes now, but at 16 I didn't. That just was there. So when Annapolis came, I said no. Now, West Point came, asked me the same question. I said no. Annapolis came back. They asked me if I wanted to play football. Well, then they were like, well, do you want to wrestle? And I said no. I've been in the Navy 25 years. It's really interesting to tell that story, wearing this uniform or the uniform I used to wear. But here's why that changed. So I'm at Cal Poly. I have a mentor, one of the few black faculty members at Cal Poly. His name is Greg Wallace, and I've been meeting with him for about a year. And I'm sitting in his office waiting for him to come for our normal meeting time. And he rounds the corner. I hear this, coming down the hallway. And he rounds the corner, and he looks like the most distinguished airline pilot I have ever saw. He has the black suit with the gold stripes around here and this hat under his arm. And I'm just like, ooh-wee, when did you enlist, sir? And he's like, actually, I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Navy Reserve. He was a captain, which is really weird, being a captain now telling the story. But he was a naval reservist. And seeing his face, this man I trusted, who helped me, was investing in me to help me develop to become the best me that I could be, wearing that uniform changed that anecdote I had. And now I had some data. And then he handed me a pamphlet. Guess what the top of that pamphlet said? Baccalaureate degree completion plan. And that started this journey that I'm on. I wasn't even going to tell you that story. That's just, oh man, I could do that all day. But that moment changed my life. Why do I say that? That's the power of exposure. That's one. Exposure is important. That's also the power of connection. I go do this a lot. I was in Israel last week speaking at a school, and I try hard to look around. It's work, but I try to look everybody in the eye. And it's really easy to see who's not connecting with you. And people just like, you show up in these pajamas and tell stories about space, and people are just like, whoa, they lean forward in a chair. So I look for the person leaning back in the chair, like not interested. And I had a couple of those. And I walked to those kids, and I want to talk to that kid. That's the kid I want to connect to. Because that would have been me back then. Because if you ain't Marcus Allen, I'm not interested. Thanks, Astronaut, but you know Marcus Allen? So, exposure is powerful. Connection is even more powerful. So you all mentor, raise, feed some child out there or some coworker, and that mentorship is powerful. Exposure and connection are powerful. It's changed my life. All right, I'll keep going. Joined the Navy while I was in college. So then when I graduate, I went off to OCS and got commissioned in 1999, got my wings of gold. That's Victor Glover Sr. pinning my wings on. And then I went down to Miramar Marine Corps. Well, I did a bunch of other stuff, but that picture is from, I learned to fly the F-18 in Miramar, San Diego, California. And was with a class of Marines, a bunch of great dudes, and one other Navy guy. And spent a year down there and haven't felt like I worked a day in my life. This has been an amazing journey. Got the opportunity to finish up there and go to the East Coast. I went to Virginia Beach and was a Blue Blaster. Another thing we have in common, Chitz was a Blue Blaster as well. BFA 34, flying like lot 19 to 21 Charlies, which nowadays you're like, oh, that's old school, man. Old and busted. No, back then that was new hotness. We had digital LAOs, AIM-9X. Anybody here work on AIM-9? Domo arigato. Thank you. That's a badass weapon. And we got some of the first ones in the fleet. Joint helmet, mids, big motors, and digital LAOs. So in 2003, new hotness. This was an amazing aircraft. And we took them to combat about a year after I got to the squadron. So between June 04 and December of 2012, if you remember when we took over the city of Fallujah, it hurt my heart when we officially conceded it in 2014. Because in 2004, 10 years before, that was our big operation, Operation Al-Fajr, when we took over Fallujah. That was what I was doing on deployment. And this is a picture behind the tanker. Combat camera wanted me to like pop a flare. This ain't like combat action. This is just popping a flare behind the tanker. But we're over Lake Tharthar. You can't see it in the background. There's some, land there and then the lake here that we would refuel over. But good memories from 04. I finished up that tour and and got to go to test pilot school. We actually were doing workups on the Lincoln, and my squadron became a part of a West Coast Air Wing, and I did workups with them, and then they literally went to deployment. I went to test pilot school down at Edwards Air Force Base and had the privilege of flying down there and then coming up here to China Lake. And when I finished test pilot school, I didn't know it at the time, but let's see, let me go backwards. Let's show that again. That's Edwards, China Lake. Woo! While I was here, I started graduate school. I went to the Navy postgraduate school to study systems engineering, and then the Department of Education would certify the curriculum at Air Force Test Pilot School to be a degree granting institution, and so they give a reasonably accredited master's degree in flight test engineering. And so I got a second master's degree, even though I had graduated already. We went through that curriculum first, and so it was I just got this thing in the mail one day, and that was pretty neat. But this is the thing I consider like I earned this one. I showed up to this and did it intentionally, and wanted to go to graduate school. Why did I stop and come back to this? Because another one of those moments changed my life, and I don't normally even tell this story, but I'm going to tell it here because it's germane to this place. I'm sitting in my office one day, and I think I had just tried to, I earned the Navy's education voucher. They give you this $20,000 a year to go get a master's degree. And I was going to do this part-time, and I was looking at Stanford, Aero Astro, USC, Viterbi School of Engineering, and the Navy Postgraduate School. And I decided on the Navy Postgrad because they were all on Fridays, and we do Flex Fridays. This was like a match made in heaven. So I'm like, I'm going to do Navy Postgrad. So I wrote them, and I was like, here you go. Here's $40,000. And they're like, we don't even know what that money is. We can't use that. And I was like, damn. That day, I'm sitting in my office in Mickelson Lab, and Danny Gresham walks by. And he's like, hey, Ike, what's the matter? And I'm like, tell him my little sob story. And he says, go see Celicia. Tell her, take care of me. How much is it? Nope, I don't want to know. Take care of me. In that moment, he changed my life. He is a part of my forever story. And I don't even know if he knows how significant that was, but I mean, it was a lot of money. It was way more than he thought, I bet you. But he had our IPT pay for my master's degree. And it changed my life. So, yeah, super grateful, super grateful. And you're going to connect me. I got to tell him again, thank you, every chance I get, because that day changed my life. And if he hadn't been walking by, I don't know what I was going to do. I might have had to just be happy with my male master's degree. But I'm really glad I got the opportunity to go to the Navy postgraduate school. So I would go to NPS, finish up there, and then I was in China Lake right at about 2 years. And the detailer, he writes me and he says, all right, you got two choices. An IA, which is individual augmentation, when they send you to the desert by yourself, and you get to go play Army, Marine, or go to War College. And I was like, that's the choice? That's really not a choice, man. So NAVAIR had waivers up to that point, and our waivers had run out, and they were no longer giving us waivers. So I would have had to go on this IA. And so I was like, sure, send me to War College. So I went to Air Command and Staff College in Montgomery, Alabama, and spent some more time with the Air Force. They're not that bad. They're actually okay. They do wear ascot under their flight suits. That I think is weird, but they're okay. And then I finished up in Montgomery and went to the RAG to requal in the Charlie, and then I flew to Japan and started my department head tour with VFA 195, the Dam Busters, Chippy Ho, and they were on deployment when I got there. We finished up they do 2-3 month deployments. And so we finished up the second half of that deployment. And then in our between period, we flew those Charlies to California. We flew a Transpac, one of the coolest things I've ever done. We went to Iwo Jima, Wake Island, Hawaii, and here with the tankers. And then we learned to fly the Super Hornet. And I asked to go to the squadron because I knew they were going to transition. And I had Rhino experience from my time here. So I got to help the squadron through this transition, and then we were going to fly back in like March or April to go on deployment in June, and it's March of 2011. Anybody remember what happened in March of 2011 in Tokyo? An earthquake triggers a tsunami. which fast forward a nuclear reactor meltdown. And I'm in Lemoore in the BOQ, and my phone starts going crazy talking about Tokyo is, under nuclear fallout. And I was like, okay, it's not that bad. It's 200 kilometers north. But my family had to evacuate and come stay with me in the BOQ room. 4 kids in a BOQ room. We actually enrolled our kids in school at Lemoore for a while. That's how long we were there. And then we went home late and started deployment right away. It was an interesting year. That was an interesting year. But so the deployment the subsequent deployment, one of our AEs was up taking pictures, and I love this picture because at the time I didn't know it. Like, I like to joke and show this picture because, what wire do we aim for on the carrier? 3. Well, it's stripped. It's not there right now, but you see, I was on the 3 wire. But actually, this picture is the last trap I got on a boat. Didn't know it at the time when he took the picture. I just thought it was pretty bad that he captured, good shot. But after that, I would cut off to Malaysia, fly home, get my family, move from Tokyo to Washington, D.C., and then we'd start a tour on Capitol Hill. I got to be a congressional fellow, and that was a really great experience. My family loved living in Japan. The only place they've loved as much as Japan was Washington, D.C., and I think it's because they have just as good cherry blossoms there. It's pretty amazing. But my family loved living in D.C., and these 2 gentlemen, I worked for John McCain. I was his congressional fellow and his military fellow, and we were talking, and it's weird to say this. I mean, it's weird to say come back to Earth. That will never get old. It's also weird to say, like, when I was talking to John McCain, but I was talking to John McCain about my experience, not knowing a lot about politics, which is what I read, and this experience. And he's telling me about Ted Kennedy and other fellows he's had that are now admirals and secretaries of the services, and just this experience and what he thinks it could be and how important it is. And that's just amazing. And we're in this conversation. I mentioned to him that one of my heroes, who is also my fraternity brother, is Congressman John Lewis of Georgia. And he's really, and he calls his scheduler and says, set up a meeting. He made this happen, and I got to stand there on the balcony and just talk to John Lewis, this is really special to me because neither of these gentlemen is alive anymore. And but that was a really amazing experience. And for those of you who say you don't like politics, I understand it. I get that, but it still affects us. And I learned a lot about how our country is run or not run by my time in that seat. And I would encourage you, especially people like this. I do a lot of outreach to NASA, and I always ask them the question, do you guys know what this acronym means? Shout it out if anybody knows what NASA stands for. Say it louder.
National Aeronautics.
Okay. What's the most important letter in that acronym? See, at NASA, they always say S. And when I go no, they're like, you're a pilot. A. I'm like, which one? I'm talking about aeronautics. No. If you forget that we work for the people, we're spending the people's money, this is going to be a very frustrating experience for you. So whether you like politics or not, you're surrounded by it. And so I don't want to get philosophical with you, but N is the most important letter in this acronym. National. We're spending the people's money, and we're sending the people to space. And if we forget that, it makes our job a little more frustrating. So this experience was super important in shaping this experience for me. So I would be sitting in my office. I applied starting back in Japan for the astronaut program, my second application, and I got a call, come interview. If you guys remember Snowmageddon, that storm that was coming to DC in 2012, and so I was supposed to go interview, and I was like, I just moved here, we got no furniture, and we're sitting on the floor, and there's a storm coming, I can't interview, and I was like, I'm never going to get to be an astronaut because I had to turn down an interview, and they were like, okay, well just come when things are settled, and I got to go back and interview after the beginning of the year, and then I was sitting at work, and I got a call from a Houston number, which I missed, and I called back and was on the phone forever. And Janet Cavandi, the chair of our board, and an astronaut, says, do you want to come to Houston to start astronaut training? And there is only one answer to that question. And I'm standing there, and I know all the dam busters, all the dust devils in the room are like, I heard the story last night, but I'm standing there in my suit in the rotunda of the Senate, Russell Senate Office building, and I'm looking around at all this marble and brass, and I'm in a suit, not a flight suit, but a suit with a tie, and I'm like, damn, this is a dream. I'm dreaming, and so I'm like seriously pinching myself. I'm 37 years old, and I'm pinching myself. And I called my wife, I called my dad. They told us not to tell anybody else until the press announcement comes out. And so the next day, I get an email from Janet. Our whole class, all 8 of us, get an email from her, and the subject line is, "It was not a dream." I love that. I love that. She knew how we felt, maybe because she had been through it before. But so I get that call in July of 2013, and in August, we all show up to Houston to start astronaut candidate training. And astronaut candidate training is really interesting. We do a lot of things, but the basics are to make you assignable to an ISS mission. And so we have to learn like 5 basic things. The first one is to speak Russian. And so that says, "Меня зовут Victor." That means they call me Victor, or what we would say is, "My name is Victor." Как вас зовут? So we all говорят по-русски, потому что надо читать процедуры по-русски. We have to be able to read procedures in Russian because some of us are going to fly on a Russian Soyuz to the space station. Some of us even get to be the pilot of the vehicle. The commander is always Russian, but you may be the pilot of a Russian spacecraft. And no matter what, when you get to the International Space Station, half of it is what we call the U.S. orbital segment, made by American, European, Japanese, and Canadian aerospace companies. And then the other half is made by essentially Energia, a Russian aerospace. Russia's, Boeing or Lockheed Martin, a Russian aerospace company. And so the buttons have Cyrillic on them. You know what I mean? On or off. And in Russian, включить and выключить are on and off. And when you learn your letters, this one right here is the V. That's Victor, V. And so on is V with this sign that is like almost like an I, but a really guttural I. And then on and off are выключить and включить. So even when you first learn it, like on and off, they both start with this, just like in English, on and off. And tell me, this is an easy thing to mistake. And I think this is really laughable. One of the things I find hilarious about the space station, it's an international space station. We planned this for years. And you get up there, and the power outlets, these things with all these on and offs that look the same, and that's confusing, they're all different. When you travel around the world and you have to take your little power converter and your plug adapters, we have to do that on the International Space Station. Don't you think we should have been able to make one plug for everything on the International Space? Nope. Thanks, NASA. Yeah, put that one. The next space station we make, let's do better. Russian. You have to learn to speak Russian. It also provides goodwill between us and the cosmonauts. If our countries got along as well as our space explorers do, the world would be a different place. One of my best friends is up there right now, Sergei Prokopiev, a Russian bomber pilot that I probably intercepted over the South China Sea. And we're telling stories and found out that we're playing basketball in the astronaut gym in Houston in 2014. And we're talking to each other about our experiences and realize we both have flown missions. He would fly out to carriers, and I would intercept bombers flying out to carriers over the South China Sea. And now we're playing basketball in the astronaut gym in Houston. And now he's the commander of the space station at this moment. Great friend. And I wish that our countries could learn from our example, or the example of human spaceflight. But that language is an important piece. Being able to speak the language is a part of making that bridge between our cosmonaut and astronaut corps. The other thing we have to learn to do is to fix all the things on the space station. So we have this ISS systems. It's very much like learning an aircraft carrier: power, data, cooling, communications, control, and the crew element. And there are all these pieces to it. And I love this picture. The NASA PAO took this picture, but that's myself and Drew Morgan, an Army colonel, physician, and ranger. And we're fixing the telephone, the space station telephone. And I love it. Like, neither one of us, that's not our jam, but that's what you do. When you go to space, you have to be the doctor, the repairman, because you can't call anybody else to come fix things. And so we have to know the systems well enough to be able to speak to and fix the things that are on the space station. We have to learn also to fly the robotic arm. And we say flying it because it is like flying an airplane and doing like mild HTML coding at the same time. And we do that to a few things. Astronauts are flying the space station, the robotic arm, to grab cargo vehicles. We will grab a cargo vehicle that doesn't dock automatically and then stick it to the space station. And so we have a few cargo ships that are still like that, like the Cygnus vehicle. The Cygnus vehicle, made by Northrop Grumman, is one we have to grapple. We grab it. It gets close to the space station. They both go into free drift, flying formation, and then we grab it and put it onto the space station. Some of them dock automatically, and so we don't have to do it for those vehicles, but we also do this for spacewalks. My very first spacewalk, Soichi Noguchi was flying the robotic arm with me on it. And I was installing a big antenna on the European laboratory. And so that's the other reason that we train I'll show you a video of that later. It's pretty cool event. Flying the robotic arm is number 3. And number 4 is spacewalking. We have to learn to spacewalk. Let me go back so you can see this time lapse real quick. Go back one and then go back to this one. Or just play that one, yeah. So this is a time lapse of about the 30 minutes it takes to get the suit on. And why I love showing this time lapse is, you see, it takes a lot of people. Well, in space, you get like one other person or maybe 2 other people to do this same work. Being in weightlessness makes it a little bit easier. But I also like to highlight that, you know, human spaceflight is a team sport. It's really hard. You wouldn't be able to do this stuff by yourself. And even when we get in the water, we each have a safety diver and a camera with us at all times. Spaceflight is Scott Kelly, the guy who did the first one-year mission for the American segment, would say it all the time. Human spaceflight is the greatest team sport on and off the planet. And I believe it is true. And then my last part of astronaut candidate training, and I would say my favorite, I'm biased, is we all become qualified air crewmen in our T-38. And whether you came from aviation or not, our scientists and teachers have to become qualified in at least the back seat. And if you came from the military as a pilot, you'll qualify in the front seat. But we all fly the T-38. And this, to me, is minute for minute the best training. We put on a special suit. We are in a pressurized environment. We're running a checklist. We have emergency procedures. We have people that we can speak to directly. We have people that we're talking to that we cannot see. And so it is like distilled human spaceflight. All of those things happen on the International Space Station. And so it is, and it also has life or death consequences. And so it's a really important part. We do a specific syllabus in the T-38. We call it SFRT, Spaceflight Readiness Training. Very important. One of my favorite parts. And so when astronaut candidate training is all over, and we do lots of other stuff. We study geology. We go on hiking and camping trips where we spend the nights out in the wilderness and study the land and learn about the Earth observations and geology that we're going to do when we go back to the moon. But those aren't like core competencies. Those were the core competencies. We do lots of other things in terms of team skills too. Learning yourself, becoming very self-aware, and becoming very aware of your team and how to work together as a team. Huge, especially now that our mission is long-duration spaceflight, living on orbit for 6 months, like our Navy deployments. Very big part of our training. But those were the basics and the core competencies. And when you finish, you get a silver astronaut pin, and you become what I would say is an ambassador of the NASA vision. I got to update my slide because we just updated our vision, but I still like these words better, and it's still true. We reach for new heights and reveal the unknown for the benefit of all people, all mankind. And this is an example of that. Anybody recognize this picture? The Navy's budget is on order of $150 billion a year. The DoD is half the discretionary budget, $700 billion a year, half of the $1.5 trillion we get to spend as a government. NASA's budget is $20 billion. The DoD would call that budget dust. And that organization changes the way you see everything, including yourselves. That first picture of the globe of Earth taken from Apollo in December 1968 initiated the effort that would become Earth Day about 14 months later. And this picture is pretty recent. It's Pluto. I don't care if Pluto's a planet, dwarf planet, Plutoid, I don't care. This was the first picture that New Horizons took. It's Pluto and its moon Charon, C-H-A-R-O-N. And this was the beginning of the first high-resolution images we'd have of Pluto. Humanity had never seen these before. And this one is fuzzy and not great, but this was the first one. And now you've seen the like heart-shaped ice fields on Pluto. Maybe you've seen it. Humanity had never seen that before, and now we have. And that's an example of what I think NASA is doing for the world, for all people. And that's accessible to everybody. The other cool thing about this picture is the day that it was taken. It was taken on July 8th, 2015, which is the same day the 8 of us got our silver astronaut pins. I had been given this brief for years before I looked at the metadata of that picture to see what day it was taken. It was transferred back to Earth later, but it was taken on July 8th, 2015. And we became astronauts on that day. And this is a very special day. And I love showing this picture of my class because before us in 2013, the smallest class selected was the original group of astronauts, the Mercury 7. I would love to put their picture up. I might do that. I'm going to update the vision, and I'm going to put their picture next to this one. Because something really important is different about our class than the Mercury 7. The Mercury 7 was all 37-year-old, white, male, military, test pilot, English-speaking Christians. They were all of those things. And I'm all of those things except one. But they are all kinds of other things. This is the only class NASA in its history has selected that's half men and half women. We need to do a little bit better in that regard. But that's because y'all need to get your daughters to speak to math and math speaking to them. We need more young women out there in these fields. So you got to help us with that. I'm doing my part, but you have to do yours too. But for first class, that's half women and half men, and we still haven't done that again since. Really important. I think that needs to become a trend. About 3 years later, I got this really great opportunity to be assigned to part of our efforts to fly American spaceships again. After the space shuttle retired in 2011, we did not have a way to get to the space station that was not the Russian Soyuz. And they're great partners, but, you know, it's nice to have your own ride. You know what I mean? Maybe you're the friend who gives the ride, but maybe you're the friend who's always bumming the ride. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Though, y'all that's not laughing, you're the one bumming the ride. So it's nice to have our own ride. And so I got this opportunity in 2018, and Mike Hopkins and I would start training for the first operational mission. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, I don't know if you saw this, they just received last week the Congressional Space Medal of Honor, the highest medal you can get for spaceflight. And I think like the last people to get them that I know of were the Apollo astronauts. Big deal, you know, getting America our own launch game for people again. And so it was really neat to be a part of this. We trained with Bob and Doug and helped SpaceX to get this vehicle working. And it was an honor to be a part of this crew. And so in 2020, we launched to the International Space Station, and that is our crew. So since we were the first operational mission, we call ourselves Crew-1, and I believe this is a video. Would you play this one for me? So, training. We still dealing. Okay. We train. We do a lot of training. We train a lot. This is Building 9, where we practice emergency procedures for the inside of the space station. I'm the only rookie on this crew, so like that bar is set pretty high for me, and I'm trying to hold up mine to the bargain. We also train in this amazing facility called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. That's where we do spacewalks, maybe the most spacey thing that we do. And then, of course, the T-38. I'm a little biased. But this is where all the training stops, and this is real. This is suit up day. We're in the same room where Neil Armstrong put on his suit to go out to Apollo 11. And then we walked out to the same launch pad that the Apollo missions launched from, and the shuttles launched from. And we look up at that vehicle, and now it's alive. This is no simulator. It's got fluids and explosives all in it. It's real. We suit up in the daytime. They launch us at night. The sun had set, and my dad is in the audience, and he says it turned into daytime when those 9 Merlin engines lit up on that Falcon 9 rocket. It got bright like it was daytime. And then they pitch out over the Atlantic, and those engines point at you. I love what she says right there. They're in the audience. They can feel the rumble in their chest, and the announcer says right there, not even gravity can contain us when we explore. It's all for one. Our motto was all for one, crew one for all. And we really were trying to focus on the mission and on Earth and the science and what we were learning. But that was the launch, and we get to orbit. My commander gave me my gold pin. So you get that silver pin when you become an astronaut, but you get your gold pin when you go to space. And NASA says 100 kilometers is the beginning of space. And so we chased the ISS down for about 27 hours, and then we went from the small spaceship to the big spaceship, where we joined our friends Kate, Sergey, who had already been up there for about a month. And we got to live there for 167 days after that. We spent a day in the Dragon, and so we spent a total of 168 days in space, 5.5 months. And it was pretty amazing. That is an amazing place. Will you go to the next one? At any one time, there are 200 to 300 scientific experiments going on the International Space Station.
Several different experiments going on inside the space station, in racks, in different little facilities, like our life sciences glove box that we use for biological and life sciences. But we also have experiments that are run on us.
Space to ground 3 for Shannon. We're watching the flame.
One of my favorite things about this video, look at the faces of the astronauts and listen to their voices.
You have been one mesmerized crew member here.
I will tell you, people say, what's it like to go to space?
Ready for this?
Busy. We work our butts off. We are working hard up there. And I love showing this video because what we're doing is so important to us. We're working hard, but we're working happy. And
will grow in this direction.
The science that we're doing is making materials safer on Earth. We're making medications better. We're improving telemedicine. That's the medicine that we do up there. We're improving crystal growth quality, which makes medications better and more effective. And we know how important some of this stuff is. I mean, basic physics things, for example. We take droplets of fuel and burn them. On Earth, you have gravity. Warm things rise. In space, that differential doesn't exist because you're weightless. When you burn a droplet of fluid in space, it's a perfect sphere. Really cool. Really cool. And we learn things about making new propulsion systems for spacecraft. So the science that we do up there is really important. And we're working really hard, but we're working happy.
Using those technologies, healthcare and medical technologies that are ways to improve life on Earth. But even more important than that, I believe space has a way of universally inspiring people. Making folks want to do very challenging things to the best of their ability is what I think human space exploration does most for humankind. So the human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important, I think, for decades to come.
I like that video. I love that video. The science is cool, but so are spacewalks. We got to do 5 spacewalks in 45 days. That's about 1 a week. For 5 weeks, busy time. My crewmate Shannon Walker is putting on new high-definition cameras. I wish the screen was bigger. Those high-def cameras gave us a view we'd never had before. And so people say, hey, what was that first look like? You're getting ready to see it. My first moment going out the hatch. This is Soichi and Kate putting us in the crew lock, the part we pump all the air out, depressurize it, get it down to vacuum, and then you open the hatch and go outside. I wish we had an IMAX screen. Even that doesn't capture it, man. When there's nothing for 260 miles straight down.
All right, Ike, you can go ahead and egress.
That's my call sign, Ike. That's it. That's the first moment. And I know y'all are looking at the Earth like, oh, look at that view. You know where I'm looking? My hands, man. I'm focused on what matters. Best advice I got before my first spacewalk, keep your world small. And I did for 3 hours, working, grinding, doing the job. I had to jump on the robotic arm. Soichi and Kate are flying me around. This is my first time in space, y'all. My feet are in the robot. I'm flying. I got this big box I'm holding. And I'm just like, I know what to do. I'm going to just drill this bolt. Just get that bolt. And then when that bolt's done, do the next bolt. My world is like this big right now. And now I'm putting the cables in. So these are the power and data cables for that robotic arm, for the box I'm putting in. And while we're trying to put them in, one of them won't go. And so this is the first time I'm on the very front of the space station. And the sun had just gone down. And now I've got a chance to look around. This isn't what's happening in the video, but I'm sitting out there on the front of the space station. I'm sideways. I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio from Titanic. And the sun comes up. I've seen the sunrise from inside the space station, but it goes behind parts of the space station. I'm out there with nothing to block. I can see it all the way around. And the sun comes up, and it is amazing. That's unique. I got to jettison a cover of an antenna. We don't get to do that often, so I got to like make some space trash. But I threw it very precisely, 30 degrees, nadir of the space station, so that it would enter the atmosphere and then burn up. That's how we get rid of most of our trash. I'll tell you an interesting story about that. Somebody remind me, space trash, okay? Put a pin in that. Somebody, hello? Okay, thank you. And so, so yeah, I'm standing out there and the sun comes up. And something really interesting about sunrise in space, I've been telling, this is like the 100th time I've told Jessica, but unlike here, when the sun comes up here, it makes the sky brighten up so the sky turns blue. In space, the sun rises in darkness. There's no atmosphere to light. There's no light bouncing off the water molecules in the air. There's no air. So when the sun comes up, the sky is still black. It is the most amazing thing to see and feel. Oh, by the way, it was just really cold out there, and now all of a sudden, all of this is really warm. It gets really warm really quickly. Sunrise and set are twilight is amazing in space. I hope you all can experience it. It is amazing. It is amazing. I watch the sunrise and set now just because of the memories from seeing it in space. It is truly amazing. But spacewalks were great. We had to do all those spacewalks because we needed to upgrade the space station. We're going to fly it until 2030. The first piece of the space station went up in 1998. The first crew docked to the space station on November 2nd of 2000. There have been humans. Do we have anybody? See, I'm usually talking to students, but we'll see. Embarrass a few people. Is anybody here born after 1998? Is anybody born? Hey, put those. Be proud of that, man. Okay? I'll trade all of this with you for those years now. Anybody born after November 2nd of 2000? Okay. So, nobody in this room, but some of you know kids who are born after November 2nd of 2000. That means like 22-year-olds, soon to be 23-year-olds, have spent their entire life, every day of their life, with a human over their head in space. Crew goes up, next crew goes up, then a crew comes home. We never leave the space station empty. It's had humans on it continuously since November 2nd of 2000. Think about that. Never before in the history of human events has this happened. This generation is the first. And I hope that changes the way we do business down here on Earth. I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. Pretty special. But we had to do these upgrades because it's getting old, man. We got cracks in the hull, and we had to upgrade the batteries. Everybody's getting lithium-ion batteries. We did too. We got new solar arrays. My second spacewalk was building a platform for the new solar arrays to generate more power and a smaller footprint. So we're trying to, keep it relevant, keep it fresh, make the old busted into new hotness. So I get asked this question a lot. You come home from a deployment and nobody goes, hey, when are you going on deployment again? But you come home from space and people are like, when are you going to space again? I don't really miss my mission. I miss the people I got to do that mission with. We made a point to eat dinner together. We made a point on the weekends to have a movie night on the carrier. We would call it a roll. We did roll-ups in space. But we also had fun. This is our commander, Sergey, and we're the middle of the space station. We call it Turkey sometimes. This is Turkey of the space station, the bridge between the east and the west. So it's a busy place. So we're just goofing off, acting like it's a traffic circle and bumping into each other. But we're just having fun. Is that a ping pong ball? No, that's orange drink. In space, you do play with your food. If you don't, you're wrong. It was a great time. We did the mannequin challenge. It was Sergey's idea. We got it in one take. I like to brag. This is the first take. We had fun. That I miss. Those times where we just, hey, what'd you do today? Oh man, I was working on the flux capacitor, man, and like it got stuck, and this I tried to kick it, and ground was like, don't do that, don't kick it. And it was our home, right? It's our laboratory, manufacturing facility, outreach facility, vegetable garden, fluid combustion integration situation, flux capacitor. But it was home, It was the place that we lived, that we slept, and we were up there from November 2020 to May of 2021. The election, the situation in DC, there's no vaccines when we left. There's vaccines developed in the time we're there, and we left the planet and came back to almost a different planet.
Happy holidays to everyone, and thank you for a great year.
We're up there for Thanksgiving. We're up there for Christmas.
Decorating mission control challenge.
I had the socks, he's got the jacket.
2, 1. Happy New Year!
This was a good idea until we all bumped our heads. It's really interesting. That was my job. I was up there living out. I love my fraternity's motto and NASA's motto: reach for new heights and reveal the unknown for all humankind. And then my fraternity, culture for service, service for humanity. I was living that daily, but also that was just my spot. That was my home. My address for 168 days was ISS, low Earth orbit. And that's an important aspect of it that I don't think gets enough airtime. That was my home. And which means my home was not Earth. I wasn't on Earth for half a year. And I'll come back. I'll come back to that one. I'll put a pin in that one too. So, as awesome as it was, like all things, that season came to an end too. So the first thing we did, we got a practice run, put our suits on, we undocked from the front of the space station, went around Zenith, which is up in space, and we are away from Earth, and we came down and docked to the Zenith, or the top of space station, to make room for Crew-2 that was going to come up and replace us. And so when they got aboard successfully, big day, a lot of celebration, we do a change of command, hand over responsibility for the ISS to them, and once they were all ready to go, we put our suits back on, got back in our Dragon, closed the Dragon forward hatch, and we left. We undocked from the Zenith docking port, the top of the space station. I took some really great pictures of the space station. It's really neat to see it, the whole thing from far away from it. I'll show them to you later if you want. That's a graphic of our entry. It's about a 6.5-hour flight. We do a burn and slow down, and then we descend. And for a part of that, you slow down, you speed up with all those rocket engines. You slow down using wind resistance. If you rub your hands together real fast, they get warm, right? Well, we're going 7 kilometers a second, 5 miles a second. We're going so fast that when we hit the Earth, the atmosphere, that air vaporizes, turns into a plasma. We are a fireball for 2 minutes. That's why that heat shield is out there. It's burning off to dissipate that heat energy. And that heat is that heat shield is protecting these parachutes and all the avionics. And so when those 4 beautiful parachutes come out, we're very happy. And we know it because the vehicle's doing this. And it's really interesting to feel accelerations in G after being in weightlessness for so long. And they slow us down from 7 kilometers per second to 7 meters per second. And we splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico. The graphic showed the Atlantic Ocean, but we landed in the Gulf of Mexico at night. First night capsule splashdown since 1968 in the Apollo program. That was a big dang deal for NASA. NASA did not let us do that easily. But we were like, we scrubbed for weather. We were supposed to land on my birthday, April 30th. We got delayed. So I got a bonus birthday in space. That was cool. And when they delayed us again, I was like, okay, it's not funny. And I'm like, my kid graduates from high school this month. And so they were like, no, but night, it's dangerous. And we were like, look, good weather at night is better than bad weather in the daytime. And so they finally relented and let us land at night. And this, when you see everybody come out, Mike's happy dance, and you're about to see Shannon's happy dance, this is the first time in 5.5 months that we are truly safe. Like, every moment of a mission in space can turn into a really dire situation very quickly. And so for the first time, like, our families are there, they see us, we see them, and it's like mission complete. Very cool time. So, I don't know if you've heard of this term, the overview effect. It's how an astronaut's worldview, personal philosophy, maybe even spirituality is affected by seeing the Earth as it really is from space. No borders, no labels. There's no legend that tells you that far is 100 kilometers. You have to figure it out. It's really hard to take a picture of something. You want to see it from space, you have to figure it out by using those natural cues. It's a challenge. But it also makes you appreciate this is what we really look like. Well, something dawned on me. I was giving this talk a few times after I got back, and the reason the overview effect is so important is because of what starts here on Earth. The sea level effect, right? All the things that I love, all the people that I'm serving and working for and who have invested in me all those years before, I brought all of that with me to space. And then something really interesting, I knew I was going to miss them. That's my family in the middle. See my little doggy there, Nala. That I knew I was going to miss. While I was in space staring at the Earth, I also had another feeling equal in magnitude. I didn't know what it was at first. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just experiencing, like, it's an isolated, confined, extreme environment. Maybe I'm just experiencing, like, some loneliness from being isolated. No, man, I missed the Earth. There's no change in weather. There's no fresh cut grass. Everything you've ever known is here, except for the 7 jokers up there. When people ask me, did you see anything strange? They're asking about aliens. I'm like, man, the strangest thing I saw was 6 other people in space. But that is what makes the overview effect so important, is what you start right here at sea level. And why that's important to me, I wish you all could go to space and see it for yourself. But I don't know if we're there yet. We're working on it. Next people to fly my spaceship were civilians on the Inspiration 4 mission. They flew Resilience, my spaceship. Yes, I told Jared the billionaire, that's mine. But we're working on that. But I don't know if we're going to get there in time for all of us to go to space. So I've got to share this fact with you. We are on a spaceship right now. It's called Earth. And we're a crew. No matter what everybody else wants to tell you that you are. Because while I was doing this and I had that feeling, like, something else became super clear to me. I had spent years, actually, 2.5 years telling NASA, don't say that I'm going to be the first black crew member on the space station. Don't say it. Let's just go do the damn thing with some class. And I got up there, and with this feeling came this. I wasn't a black, male, military, test pilot, English-speaking Christian. I was a human. And we don't get to feel that often because the world wants to tell you who you are. You're a woman. You're a black man. And they want you to be that. Sometimes you need to. Sometimes there's a reason to. But how often do we just get to be one people? And that's, to me, the reason I went to space and came back was to share that with you. All that science was great. But if I didn't share this, I missed the point. This is the thing that I wish all 330 million people in this country, all 7 billion people on the planet could do. And it wouldn't, look, it's not a panacea, okay? It wouldn't end world hunger and bring about world peace. But it sure would not make it worse, okay? So, yeah. I'm going to wrap up here so we can get into Q&A. And I'll stay as long as you guys want. I mean, we have crew day to get home tonight, but we got 2 pilots. They give us a lot more time, so we'll make it work. I hope we can get into a discussion, though, because I think we can talk about some weighty things that I think that matter to you here at NOC-WD and in China Lake, and to our Navy, and to our nation, and to humanity. While I was off the planet, I wish they would let me wear an Earth patch. You know, when you're in space, you represent all people. That's true. It's so true. I am up there on behalf of my government, but I represent humanity when I'm doing that job, and I felt that. So, one more, please. I am really encouraged coming back here, and it's an honor to come home. Like literally, my mom is at the visitor center. You know, I spent some good years here and like met some really amazing people. And this is a special brief, and I hope you've enjoyed some of that. I also want to take a minute, go to the next slide, please, just to honor some of the folks that go to the next slide. I didn't mean to put that in there, but I was made aware that we've lost quite a few of our brothers and sisters since my time here, and I just wanted to put a few of these faces up here and to just say it in public that I dedicate this talk and this time to them and to their memory, and this place is better for them having been here, and so I hope we do right by them. I'm going to end there so we can start with the questions. This is the fun part for me. So we can go to the next slide and then we'll be done. Okay. All right. Wait. I'm sorry. One quick thing. So one point, I've got to do some logistics real quick and then we'll get into the questions, okay? Write them down, have them, or the quiz will start. I'm not kidding. All right. So I do not know. Oh, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it. I got to make a little bit, but it's gone. It's already burned up. It's no longer there. So, Skipper from the Dust Devils, would you please? Had a really great time hanging out the squadron with you all last night, and it was an honor to talk to you. Man, all you JOs, even you young lieutenant commanders, man, I would trade place with you in a heartbeat. I know you think I'm being facetious, but I'm being honest with you. I would love to do this all over again. I'm closer to the end of this journey than the beginning. I'm 25 years in the Navy, and I would love to do what you're doing again. This is the best job I've ever had, doing what you do. Not kidding. I know the guy who went to space for half a year is telling you, when I was here, this was the best job I have ever done. This is the best job title, but you have the best job I have ever done. And so I just wanted to give you a small token of appreciation. That's a mission board from our time on space station. That's me throwing out the space trash. That's those Falcon 9s doing the good work. Just look at that for a minute. That's our crew in the airlock, some science we did, and that's our spacecraft after entry. That plasma field burns up the side of the vehicle. And this is a Navy flag that flew with me on my Dragon in the spaceship for the whole 6 months I was in space. So that very flag was in space, and this plaque tells you about it. And so I'd love it if you guys would take that as a small thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the time. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Skipper. And Mr. Carino, if you'd received this for the Naval Air Warfare Center Weapons Division, yeah, that side's fine too. You know, if that's your good side, let's do it. I get it. Trust me. I get it. I'm flexible. This is an American flag that's in the same thing. In that kit, I flew some American flags, and so this flag spent 168 days in space, millions of miles. It traveled with us during Expedition 64 and 65, and so would love it if you'd accept that on behalf of the Warfare Center. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Questions? Yes. Please. Yes. Tell me your name, please.
It's on.
My name is Kristen Bobadilla. My question is fairly simple, in my opinion. What made you choose USAF TPS over USN TPS and why?
Oh, hey, Kristen. Thank you. Easy question, because it's in California, and I'm from California. That is, like, look, I try to keep it pretty simple, right? There's some easy decisions in life, and that was one of them. I'm from Southern California, so the opportunity to do TPS and, you know, be close to my people was a no-brainer. And actually, there is a little bit more to it than that. When they asked, you know, about, I had to, in my application, put the programs I wanted. And actually, the number one, they had an opportunity to go to the Navy postgraduate school. They called it the co-op back then. I don't think that exists anymore. But I wanted co-op because I knew as a fleet guy, there's not many chances to get a master's degree. So my number one choice was co-op, even though I knew the chances were low. Number two was West Coast TPS, and then East Coast TPS. And I think their French TPS was in there too, so maybe I put the French one. But they wanted to know where you wanted to go after. In my application, I had to put where I wanted to work. And mine was VX-31. And so I wanted to be a weapons test guy. I wanted to do this. When I showed up in my check-in and they said, you're going to the AWL, I was like, oh, cool. And then they're like, oh, we got a guy leaving. You're going to go be the website PT deputy until Ubi leaves. I was like, yes. That is the job I wanted. When I was down at Edwards, I would drive up here and just, you know, come do familiarization stuff. So that was why, though. It started because it was in California, and then it got me here. So that was an easy one. Yeah. Thanks.
So before we get to the next question, I know I had a question for you. And I know your call sign and I know what it means, but can you expound on that just a little?
So Ike stands for I know everything, which yes, laugh. It's funny. And so I think that, you know, there's some really great stories out there. Believe it, you got to tell your call signs. So there's some good call sign stories out there, and I love this. This is one of the things I love and miss about the Navy. NASA's a little more straight-laced, you know what I mean? I got this from my skipper. So you have call sign reviews. We had this big, you know, party, social event, and we have the senior JO. We call him the Joe Papa. It's this guy named Jonathan Fraser, Pigger Fraser. Pigger goes up and he's like, you know, each of us has a turn, and so we go up there and they start putting options up there, and you have to pay a fee to put something up there. And then if I want to defend my honor, I have to pay a fee too. I'm not telling you all the details of what this payment entails, but for a reason. It was a long time ago. And so it's fun. It's a funny event. It's fun. It's good humor. And the skipper is usually in the room just to prevent, like, around this time, this was 2003, we had a skipper relieved because of a call sign that was painted on the side of a jet. It was something that the public deemed inappropriate. And so they're usually there. They're not active participants. They're usually there just to make sure they're not going to get fired, right? So they have veto power. So they're putting options up there. My call sign I showed up with was Rubber Glover. In the training command, I showed up to my first BFM, and we had a guy in the squadron, an instructor, Major Alpo Albert. He refused to fly with someone who didn't have a call sign. So when I showed up as, you know, Ensign Glover, he was like, no, we need a call sign. What is it? Nothing? You got nothing? Glover, Rubber Glover. So I had Rubber until I got to this squadron in 2003. And Rubber went back up there. You remember those Old Spice commercials? Old Spice was up there. A bunch of other funny things. And then our skipper gets up from his table. He doesn't say anything either, like, you know, no fine. He just gets up, walks to the board, and he writes ITIKE in big old letters, and then turns around and goes back to his table, you know, head of the table, sits down. And Pigger's standing up there like, Skipper, you want to tell us what this means? And he says, I think I know everything. And then we vote. And he was like, so what? And everybody, it was unanimous. And so Pigger did me a solid, though. He said, all right, it has to sound good as well. So he took off the IT and just made it IKE. I know everything. And it is a reminder to never pass up an opportunity to keep my mouth shut. After all that talking, I know. More questions? I'm gonna start asking you questions. Come on now.
Got anybody?
How fast is the space station going? Anybody know how fast the space station is traveling around the Earth? Yes, sir. Get that to him. 17,500 miles an hour. Why is that special? And I'll get to your question. Why is that special? Orbit is not this magic thing. It's physics. You saw me throw that patch. Because it's thin, it actually flew through the air. Wind resistance held it up. But if I drop this remote, use the pin, something I can't break. If I drop this pin, it falls due to the acceleration of gravity, 9.81 meters per second squared. If I throw the pin, it does the same thing. It still falls at 9.81 meters per second squared. It's just going that way when it does it, right? If I could throw this pin hard enough, it would come back to me. So I'd have to throw it high enough for it to continue to fall before it hit the ground. But I could throw it. It's physically possible to throw it far enough that it would go all the way around the Earth and then land where I'm at. Does that make sense? I'm saying it's just theoretically possible. I couldn't physically do it though, but it's possible. I could throw it even harder than that. What happens if I throw it fast enough to go around the Earth and pass me? That's called orbit. But the whole time it's still falling. So here's the secret of orbit and why that speed is important. I'm giving you a practical orbital mechanics lesson. Weightlessness is continuous freefall. And that's why everything floats. The reason I'm floating in space is because the space station is falling down. But it's falling down at the same rate that the Earth is curving away from it. That speed is 17,500 miles an hour at about 250 miles up. So the space station's falling, and I'm falling in it, so everything inside floats. Does that make sense? It's not magic. Like, it doesn't float for its space is, it's kind of special, but it's because I'm in continuous free fall. Really interesting concept. You're falling around the Earth. Okay, question.
Sure. First, a comment. I actually work on the parachute systems with NASA, so it was great to see you guys come back and see the main parachutes and everything
Thank you.
up. So it's pretty awesome to see you guys.
Thank you.
And to have our own domestic capability is pretty awesome. My question has nothing to do with parachutes, though. I was curious what station smells like.
Good question. What's your name? Mike. Mike wants to know what the station smells like. Oh, like a place that 300 plus people have been, that has been the same space for 22 years. Yeah. What does it smell like? I don't know if there's one thing. Not quite like the high school locker room. A little bit better than that. But it's not like, it doesn't smell great. It doesn't smell great. It smells old, like, you've been there for a while. But the air conditioning system, it keeps it cool and the air is moving. And so, like, it doesn't stink, or at least you get used to it and you don't feel every day like you're surrounded by it. But there's a picture on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you Google Don Pettit, Don Pettit is one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And he did a lot of science videos while he was on the space station. And because you don't walk, the bottom of your feet, the skin just really loosens. And some people have like the whole bottom of their foot just kind of slough off. Well, he has a video where it's backlit and he takes his sock off and you just see skin just like powder just go. I thought about that every day. Because those skin cells are still up there. At least some of them. So, I mean, it's not, I will tell you this though. So, we also test the surfaces, all the surfaces for microbes, and we keep it clean. So it's not dirty. It's not dirty. It does smell old. It's really old and metallic. And honestly, the overriding smell is computers. You know how computers smell when you walk into a server farm? That's the big smell. There are some organic people smells, but we keep it clean because microbes up there could be really dangerous. Your immune system goes on vacation when you go to space. We don't know why. There's a lot of things that happen. Your bones also, like, you have these enzymes that, like, you have two types of bone, the spongy and the spiny stuff, the brittle, that's called cortical and trabecular bone. One of them stays normal, and the other one, it doesn't reproduce itself. So while you're in space, your bone density goes down. We essentially cause osteoporosis when you go to space. And the interesting thing we learned about osteoporosis from Osteopedia is we don't know why osteoporosis happens. But the therapy, the medications, and the physical, like the recommendations to weightlift and things, come from keeping astronauts healthy in space. So it's really interesting what happens and what we don't know about what the body and what computers are like in space. But we learned some interesting things trying to figure them out. And it is a very clean place, because if your immune system was compromised and the place was covered in microbes, it would be really bad for astronauts. You are in a very weak spot, and then you land, and within the week you land back on Earth, your immune system is back to almost normal. Really interesting. So it's very clean. It's just it smells funny. That's got my official answer. Funny. How does it smell? Funny. Good question. Thank you. Next question.
Hey, Melvin D. Berry. It's the two questions, actually.
Okay.
So the first one was just out of curiosity. I saw the picture when you came in for re-entry. You had a bandage on your arm. So did something happen during re-entry, or is that like an incident from the space station?
Good question. We are constantly being poked and prodded. That picture you see is me about 5 hours after landing on Earth. We got back to Houston. They flew us right back to Houston to be with our family. But when I landed, they pulled us out of the spacecraft, wheeled us into a medical tent, and started ultrasounding my neck. IV was in my arm. I mean, I was like, is anybody going to hand me some water and a sandwich? And I'm like, I've given pints of blood, and like, they've taken all this imagery from me. So that was just from the IV. That's where my IV was. Yeah. And I did get a sandwich, by the way.
Thank God. And then the second one was, well, I know that the spacewalk was probably your most eventful task, but as far as the experiments go, were y'all rotating through the ongoing 250 experiments, or were you just designated to a certain amount?
Good question. All the above. There are so many constraints to the schedule. What crew members are trained for what? We divide and conquer some things. Some things everybody gets to do. We had a really special scientific experiment where we did surgery. We don't talk about this a lot, but I'm going to talk to you all about it. We do surgery on rodents. And so 2 of us were trained to do the surgeries. So we had to do them all. And they all had timing. Like we had to give injections, and then so many days and hours after that injection, we had to do this thing. And so that was a very precisely coordinated and scheduled thing. And so Mike and I had to do all of those. And we would be in the glove box, a box with 4 holes for the arms, and we'd be in there doing the science. And then Soichi was the person moving things around, putting samples in the freezers, bringing equipment. And so some things are like a spacewalk, very tightly coordinated. And so it had to be us. Some of the science was anybody. You may have noticed there's a fluids experiment. We actually have open jars of fluids that are running through pumps, and you saw Shannon do it. One of the ones where she was all smiley, and then you saw, I think there's pictures of me doing the same thing. So we both were able to do those fluidics science experiments. So it really depends. It depends on the science, the constraints, the timing, and when it has to be done. And then there's also science that's done on us. The #1 scientific experiment going on is how is this experience affecting the human body? So we ultrasound our eyes, and we do imagery and take pictures of the back of our eyes, and we give blood and other fluids. And all those things are constantly going on. So it's all of the above. It's a mixture of everything. Yeah. Good question. Very good question.
Anyone else?
Steve.
Come on over. You got one?
Go ahead. While we were there were some interesting sightings. The ground would, send them up to us and tell us where to look and which direction to point. The problem is you look, the pictures that we take are of the Earth most of the time. So there's a cupola, those beautiful windows that we have, they're on the bottom, the nadir side of the space station. Often those things were the horizon and beyond, and so the space station structure is in the way. And so we didn't do a lot of observation. We took a lot of pictures. You can see some really interesting things in the Milky Way. And Soichi he was really phenomenal with the cameras, and he put together a series of pictures, a bunch of snapshots that we tied together into a time lapse where you can just see the Milky Way rotating around us. Really amazing. We got some Aurora Borealis shots that are really amazing when you process them and look at the effects that are actually going on in the atmosphere. But it is challenging to do really good. You're in the best place to do it, though, because you're not in the atmosphere. There's no water absorbing the light you want to see. It's the best place to observe space, but it's challenging from inside the space station. That's why that view on the spacewalk is so amazing, because I don't have that now. Nothing's blocking me. The one thing I will say from space, just like seeing sunrise, it just goes against the rest of your life experience. Sun comes up, it's still dark outside. I mean, the Earth is light, the space station lights up, but the sky is still black. Another thing, because you're looking through atmosphere at stars. It absorbs some of the water, so you don't see them as distinctly. The other thing is, I don't know what it is, but the atmosphere must just attenuate enough where they all kind of look like they're the same distance. They're bigger and smaller. When you see airplanes moving and things, those clearly seem closer. But the stars all seem to be there. They're all a bajillion miles away. When I looked in the sky, or up into space, like the thing that is clear is you're in space. And so there's dimensionality to it. You can see that's really far, and that's not as far. Like, not quite like being surrounded by fireflies. It's not moving, but there's just depth. You're up there. And so it's being out of the atmosphere is really amazing. Being in the atmosphere is really amazing too. This is important. Yeah. Oh, y'all.
Captain Glover, what was his question? We didn't hear it.
Oh, the question was, did you do astronomical observation?
Got it.
Good question. Yeah. We're going to come back to space trash. I'm going to tell you space trash. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So my question is, 5.5 months in space with a diverse group of people, there had to be potentially some conflict. So what can we as a workforce, maybe what are some lessons learned with conflict resolution that we can apply? Assuming you didn't have the opportunity, if you're upset to go out for a nice little walk, had a very different meaning than us. So what lessons can we take for conflict in the workplace with a diverse workforce? Thank you.
What is your name?
Brittany.
Brittany, thank you for that question. Thank you for being concerned about that. This is a discussion, and I will give you a piece of this discussion. We did something that I thought was really helpful. I'm just going to give you one because I could talk for a long time about this. Mike and I decided very early on, when we have a problem, what are we going to do? And that was months of discussions, and he played college football, I played college football. And we leaned a lot on sports and things we learned from coaches. And so we came down to kind of these two needs. And one was, the ground's going to call you up and say, hey, I know you inventoried that bag of batteries yesterday, but we missed something. Can you go do it again? And like after the third or fifth time, that might like make you upset. And so we decided for something like that, we would just tell each other, this is the mission. And the discussions leading up to that, though, were how powerful. We wanted to go to space. We dreamed to go to space. Why are you going to space? To do the work. So this is the mission. Like, come back to why we're there. Just because you're doing this thing 5 times, this is what humanity needs from us. This is the mission. We also happen to be fans of The Mandalorian. So we had them ship up season 2, I think. And so we're watching season 2. And no kidding, we're watching season 2. And one of us had to inventory smart card, the little memory cards, the little ones that are this big. Hey, weightlessness is awesome, yo. I got to fly for 6 months. The problem is, it's not just me. Everything flies. When I open that bag of these small things, guess what? They all want to go everywhere. And so I've got to go through and count these things in hard drives on a computer. It's hard to keep track of them. So it makes it challenging. It's a logistical challenge. It's fun to Superman, but it is a logistical challenge. So this happened to us, and we're watching the season of Mandalorian. And you know what they say in that, the Mandalore, they have this saying, this is the way. This is the way. So we would use that, and now it's funny because it connects. We all of our whole crew love the show. And so the ground will call up, Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Can you do blah, 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 blah? And then you'd hear somebody. We wouldn't do it on the microphone. We would just go, this is the way. And it would just, the lights came back on. You know, it was like, you never felt bad because now it's funny. So we spent some time coming up with a system. That was a big part of it. So then the second piece was more personal. If you get into it, you know, you're like, hey, ground, we should do this. I want to do this. And they're like, no. No, Thomas said, how are you, sir? They want you to do this thing. And they're like, no. And you're like, no, but I really want to. And I think I should. You think you know more than the ground? This happens a lot. And the ground has reams of data that you don't have. They have insight to things that you don't have. They know things like that are right now that you don't know. But you're like, I'm here in space. and your ego is involved. Your intellect is kind of there. You're in an environment that's like 100 times the levels of CO2 that you are on the ground. So you're a little hypoxic, which is essentially being mildly drunk. And you sometimes think you know better. And if you think you know better, and we see you getting into one of these ego contests, we came up. This was when it was just Mike and I. We were assigned for about 1.5 years before the rest of the crew joined. And so we leaned on our football experience. And, when the coach is like, all right, everybody come in. What does he say next? Take a knee. Take a knee. And so we said, all right, here's what's valuable about that, though. We spent the time, like right here, like, okay, this is what we'll do. Oh, that time was we were building trust. And we were building a scenario where if he ever was like, I take a knee, it wasn't because he said it in the moment. It's because we spent months of coming to an agreement. Trust, time, communication, common understanding, and a bonus of shared language. Did you catch all that? That worked for us. That may not work in every situation, but if you spend time to do that, that's never wasted time. Not a moment of that is wasted. You cannot build relationships without intentionality, time, trust, and communication. And even if you don't get what you wanted out of it, what you got is just as important. So spend that time. That's what I would say. Thank you for asking the question. Keep asking those questions and take that time to do those things. We did it and it worked for us. I don't know what situation you may have to apply that to, but I've seen that work in other situations, and I would say it will get you along in whatever journey, whatever challenges that you're trying to overcome. Yeah. The other thing is, those rely on a relationship, though. A relationship has to exist for those things to happen. And unlike some things, if we needed a wrench, we can 3D print wrenches. They're not very good wrenches, but I can 3D print tools in space. You can't make relationships on demand. So that's the other thing, is realizing, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. We're one people. I know some of y'all, especially in a room full of scientists, I'm not a people person. Look, man, you're a social primate. You know science, you're a social primate. You can't live. You definitely can't function without other people. We are all people. And so time to invest in relationships is never wasted, I think. I believe that. Thank you for that question, Brittany. Well, I was getting ready to start more pop quiz questions. All right, good job.
Hi, my name is Davin, and I guess my question is kind of a more experiential type thing. So I imagine when you're up in the space station, you get intimately familiar with Newtonian physics. So moving around and, the struggle of having to deal with things and trying to navigate through the space station compared to, moving around Earth where you can take a step and you know what's happening. What was that like? What was your experience with getting adjusted to zero gravity?
Painful. Painful. And no hair to cushion the blow. First, 2 days is laughable. You turn a corner and, ice skaters, they spin. If you reduce the diameter, you increase the rotational velocity, right? I don't know why. I would float, I'd be like, okay, I got this. I'm going down the center of the module. And then I'd want to turn and go into the bathroom or the gym. And I'd grab the handrail, and it was just a reaction. As soon as I would catch it, I would pull myself in. You know what I'm doing? Now I'm accelerating around the corner. And I can't tell you how many times I was like, pow, into the wall. And it was painful. No kidding. I had bumped my head so many times. I wore a safety helmet for a few days. It was like, I'm going to jack myself up. And then I was diving through our garage, we call the PMM, where we keep just stuff. There's just stuff chock full. I'm digging through looking for a thing, and a bungee cord is being stretched. I don't know it. I'm pushing the equipment and things, and then it just lets go and goes, whoop, pow. And it hit me in that safety helmet, and I was like, ooh, that could have been my eye. So there were a few days where I was walking around looking like the kid from the Christmas Story, man, just every piece of safety equipment. I had goggles on, the hat, man, the gloves and everything, and it's just man, this is dangerous. But I had to learn to be a little more savvy, and you develop it over time. The human body is quite amazing. And same thing, going to space and learning to live in weightlessness, you have that same challenge when you come back to Earth. After your body is saturated, and you get saturated after about a week. Your body's like, I'm here. Physiologically, your heart, your blood pressure, and the fluids in your body still change for months after that. But essentially, most of the effects on your body from weightlessness happen after a week. And so then I get used to it. And then coming back to Earth now, same thing. I was 45 years old and I knew how to walk intellectually, but my body wouldn't do it. And I had to learn to walk again. And it took 4 hours to do what you saw me come off the plane doing. If I flew to Mars, that's a 6 to 9 month journey one way. I would not try to do a dang thing for 4 hours. It would take about 4 hours before I was comfortable, moving bags and maybe starting to build a habitat. And Martian gravity is different than the Earth, but still, right? I know that's at least a starting point. I'm not going to jump out of my seat and start doing stuff because I might hurt my crewmates or me. But yeah, the same adjustment was necessary coming back to Earth and living back in 1G. Really interesting. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
I just wanted to know what type of communication were you able to have with your family while in space?
Good question. So I say this was my 6th deployment. 5 deployments on aircraft carriers. And, the POTS line wasn't always something, the phone system on the ship, you couldn't always count on. Email, sometimes they shut it down. Like we just didn't have email on and off the ship. But, I kept in touch with my family on a carrier. From the space station, we have this network of satellites called TDRS. The TDRS network, I believe we have an important part of the, one of the ground stations is not far from here. But the TDRS network almost gives us continuous coverage no matter where we are over the globe. There's so many satellites in that constellation. And so if I have a TDRS link, I can get on a computer, put on a headset, and call my family. And I love our phone system. It's an IP phone. I can call Earth, but Earth can't call back. No telemarketing. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's great. It's great. And then weekly you had a once a week teleconference, a video conference with your family. And then any birthdays or holidays, you got an extra one. I was there from November to May, like all the holidays, 3 of my 4 kids' birthdays. And so I felt like I was talking to them 2 to 3 times a week. And it's a good satellite high definition video. And since I've been back in the almost 2 years since I launched, they've got a new app where NASA had to set that up and like put you all together. Now you can call your family directly on a video call. And so, I mean, the connectivity is really amazing, really amazing. And that's a huge game changer. Like I called my wife at about month 4 and asked her, how you doing? How are you really doing? And she said, I feel like you're on a trip to SpaceX in California. And so, man, that says a lot. Like NASA puts a lot of stock in keeping us in touch with our family. Very important. Thanks, Ryan.
I have a question for you. My name's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I have a question for you, more forward-looking. What do you think about returning to the moon?
Awesome.
Can you give us more thought about that? What is your preparation for that?
All right.
What are the chances of that taking place?
How long do we have? Whoa. Oh. Did you say what are the chances of it taking place?
Yes.
Already happened.
Great.
Okay, yeah, let's talk this. Let's talk. So, Artemis is our program, right? Artemis is the twin sister in Greek mythology of Apollo. So our current program is Artemis. The Artemis program involves a couple different really important pieces: exploration, ground systems. Nobody cares about that stuff. It's all the logistics. It's the most important stuff, in my opinion. We got this great rocket system called the Space Launch System. It's the most powerful rocket ever built. Now that it's flown, I can say that. I love it. At takeoff, 8.5 million pounds of thrust at sea level. Saturn V was 7.5. Different technology. It was liquid. That's still badass. That's pretty amazing that humans did that. Solid rocket boosters, liquid, all together. And on top of that stack, it has the Orion capsule. The older Apollo era had the Saturn V rocket with the Apollo capsule on top. We went back to capsules. We learned a lot from the orbiter. This time of year is our Remembrance Day, where we remember the Apollo 1 mission, the fire that killed those gentlemen, the STS-51 that killed Challenger, and then the STS-107 that killed Columbia, February of 2003, 20 years ago. And that's why I was in Israel, by the way. I was with the family of that Israeli astronaut on the 20th anniversary of his death. It's really profound. So this time of year, we remember those things. And that design for the orbiter, as cool as it was and as symbolic as the space shuttle was, it was a bad thing. We made it too complicated. When water falls through the atmosphere, what does it look like? A drop. Guess where we got this spaceship The capsule designed from nature. It makes sense. Fluid, it's about fluid flow. And water falling through the atmosphere is a two-density fluid flow problem. This is not, I love data. Anecdotes are great. Wings are great. I'm a pilot. I want to land it. Yeah, I do. But my family wants me to fly a capsule. So we went back to a capsule. And in November of last year, after trying twice, and we were there for the first try or the second try, both, and then I was out of the country on the third try, and on November 16th, 2 years after I launched, November 16th is a super special day to me. I launched and Artemis 1 launched. We launched a capsule. There was no crew. There were mannequins in there to see how cosmic radiation is going to affect human physiology tissues. We built 2 of them specifically to look like women so we can see how that difference in tissue densities and the different physiology would be affected by radiation. But we sent these 3 mannequins to the moon. They orbited the moon for a long time, went farther than a human spacecraft has ever gone. They went and did this thing called a distant retrograde orbit, meaning they went away from the moon, behind the moon, away from Earth, and then they came back real fast and hit the Earth's atmosphere. I told you we were going 5 miles a second. They were going about 7 miles a second. And I know we got a lot of scientists in here, so kinetic energy proportional to the square of velocity, and heat transfer is proportional to the third power, the cube of that velocity. So that energy in that heat shield going up, 10-20% in speed is a huge increase in energy from that on that heat shield. And so we learned some things. There were some things that were surprises to us, but overall the heat shield protected the avionics structure and the crew inside. We have sensors to tell how it was on the inside. And that mission landed not long ago, and we're analyzing that heat shield now, but NASA's probably going to announce the crew for Artemis 2 in the next month or 2, and then we're going to have 4 people and a backup training to go to the moon. Right now we're saying that mission will be at the end of 2025. But, I mean, okay, 25, y'all work in DOD acquisition, right? Things, what direction do things move? Well, maybe. So, but soon. But I mean, listen to where we are, okay? Like, let's put this in context. Y'all gonna have to just hook me off the stage because I'm gonna just start talking. Look, we have a space station that's been in orbit. The first piece went up in 1998. We have SpaceX vehicles flying to the space station on a regular clip. We have a Boeing vehicle being developed right now that's going to be a second human transfer to low Earth orbit capability from America. We have Soyuz spacecraft and rockets still flying from Russia via Kazakhstan that our astronauts are flying on. And we now have the most powerful rocket ever built. When we fly the upgraded, we're going to put a bigger upper stage on it so we can get more to the moon and eventually stuff on the way to Mars. That'll be the tallest and most powerful rocket ever built when it's the Block 1B. We built the Orion spacecraft. We built all the ground systems. We upgraded those launch pads. That Artemis 1 launched from the same launch pad Apollo missions and shuttle missions launched from. All that didn't just happen overnight. We are now doing, right now, everything the agency's ever done. Skylab, check. We got a station. Apollo, going to the moon, check. We sent the spacecraft. No crew. We'll take care of that soon. We've got humans in space at all times, and we're about to send a crew to the moon. Like, NASA is as busy as it's ever been. Why don't you hear about it more, though? A couple things. One is just culture. It's 2023, and I'm sorry, but we just don't make TikToks. So if we made more TikToks, I'm being facetious, but it's true. Our social media is kind of stuff we learned in the 80s, and we're still playing that game plan. We got to upgrade that a little bit. Maybe some of y'all can help us with that. Also, 2011, when the shuttle retired, we started flying out of Russia. And I'll just tell you this, man, y'all aren't as interested in what's launching out of Russia. So CNN is not as interested. Fox News is not as interested. BBC is not as interested. The Russian media loves it, especially when we fly with them. It's a sign of honor and prestige for them. But American media is like, whatever. So kids are like growing up going, man, there's nobody in space anymore. It sucks. We used to have a space program. Why are they still hiring? I moved into my house. My neighbor came to my door, had the newspaper, was like, is it you? I was like, yes, sir. It's like, why is NASA hiring astronauts if it's closing? This guy, we live 8 miles from the Space Center, and he's been there his whole life. So we need to tell the story better. But a part of it is that space shuttle, that iconic space shuttle, it drew you in. It caught your heart. And then you'd go learn about that, thermal protection system. Silica tiles, you've seen that picture of somebody holding a red hot tile in their hand with no glove, yeah, people would learn about thermal protection and propulsion and the science we were doing because that shuttle captured their hearts. Well, that's where we're getting back to. That's why having an American spaceship is important. And now this big rocket. I really hate the term mega moon rocket. NASA's using that. It sounds ridiculous, but we have a big rocket, it's SLS. And so we've already sent the spaceship to the moon, and it hung out there for a while successfully. And now we're going to launch people. That crew is going to start training, I would say, this summer, maybe spring. And so it's happening. It's happening. And I'm going to say this. You know, I'm supposed to be here for the Black History Month program, so I'm going to say this. You can trust me when I tell you this. I'm the supervisor of all the crews training to go to space. Everybody up there or training to go or who just got back is in my branch. And when that crew shows up in my branch, there's a lot of talk about who that is and what they're going to be. Go back to my earlier comment about the world likes to slice and dice us, put us in these boxes. And then NASA, with the best of intentions, added something that I think is a little divisive to this conversation. In the Trump administration, we would say, we're going to send the first woman and the next man to the moon. Okay. It's time. But I live by like the Emmitt Smith philosophy, though. When he would score a touchdown, you remember what he would do? Give the ball to the ref and go hug his lineman. You know, respect the guy running the rules and go hug the people who helped you get there. He had class. And here's the other thing, though. He had already scored touchdowns before that. So he's like, I've been here before. When you've done something a few times, you can put it in perspective. You can have a little class. You're not in there doing the damn icky shuffle. You've been there before. But here's the other thing Emmitt Smith will tell you. I know I was going back. Only people who have been to the moon? NASA. I think it's a good analogy. But we're also going back. Let's have some class. Let's just do it. What I'd love to do, assign the crew, tell nobody. Get them training, send them to the moon, and when they all lift their visors, then you find out who it is. But the tagline, the Strategic Comm Office, because it helped in Congress, and Congress gives us our budget. The new tagline in the Biden administration became, we're going to send the first woman and the first person of color to the moon. And I'll tell you, when I was in space, that happened. I was already on the ISS. And I called my boss and I said, I don't like that, boss. If they say we're going to send the first black person to the moon, I might throw my badge at them. We don't need anything more dividing us. Space, this patch is one of the most unifying things in the universe. Right after the American dollar. I mean, it's amazing. And I don't want anything to change that. Not even my own story. This patch shall not take away from this patch. I didn't show up to be NASA's black astronaut. I'm a test pilot, yes. I'm an astronaut, though. No hyphen. And so when that crew shows up in my branch, no matter what they look like, how many of them are women, how many of them are men, how many of them are brown, how many of them are peach, they're going to be the crew that we're going to get ready to do that mission, to be the best stewards of your stuff and your people. And I promise you that. I am wholly committed to that. And no matter what the strategic comms folks are saying, that's the sentiment in our office. They're going to be the right people. But that's happening soon, sir. So pay attention. I know you probably don't watch NASA TV. You might want to start. We're flying helicopters on Mars, by the way. I didn't throw that in there. The robotics, non-crew stuff, I don't talk about a lot, but we are doing amazing things. We have a spacecraft orbiting Jupiter, taking pictures of Jupiter, but also dipping low into the magnetosphere, learning about the science of that planet closer than we've ever been before. We're all over the solar system. And out of it. Voyager is still flying. We're not talking to it, but we were for a while. We knew when it left our solar system. Like, that's amazing. A man-made thing left our sun system. Pretty amazing. So we're doing big things. So you may want to start watching NASA TV. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And that was the short version.
Anybody else? Yeah? Okay. A couple. Two more.
Hello, my name is Sierra, like the mountains.
Hi, Sierra. Like the mountains.
Yes. So my question is, when I think about space, I get super overwhelmed, and I'm like, wow, that's really big. So when you were like in space, did you ever just have a moment where you just panicked and you were like, wow, this just goes on forever? Or were you chill?
Sierra, like the mountains. I was just chill. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we train so much that we try to minimize surprises. All astronaut training could be reduced to that: minimize surprises in orbit. Um, if you've read the book The Right Stuff, the movie doesn't really get into the psychology of it. The book by Tom Wolfe is amazing, and it talks to this ability to, in the heat of things all going crazy, to do the right thing, the next right thing. The book is amazing. Read it. But it's the same idea. Like, that training helps desensitize you to the emotional response of the thing. And you still have them. You're just either able to metabolize it quickly or work through it. This, though, I love to sit in the cupola and just stare at the Earth. And it was one of my first times doing it. Within the first week of me being there, I'm sitting in the cupola, and the sun is up, and it's behind the station, but there's just this bright blue Earth. And again, like, as soon as you get up past the atmosphere, it's black. It is a really interesting distinction. And so, like, beautiful Earth and then black. And you can't see stars when the Earth is, like, lit up, but there's a lot of black. And you look up at the sky right now, that's not black, that's dark blue. Until you get out the atmosphere and see it, you don't know what black is. It's clear, like, oh, that's something different. It's darker. That blackness is, it can make you feel really small. And this is how I felt, though. I'm sitting there between Earth, everything I've ever known, Shakespeare and Gandhi, I saw all down there, and then a lot of nothing. There's stars and other planets out there, but it's mostly black. And I'm in between them. And you feel small, like it's clear we are small, like this is small. But with all the resources of Uncle Sam, we built a special satellite, Kepler, just to stare at planets, or stars, to see if planets are revolving around them. When it gets dim, we can see a planet, and we can see how far they are, see what kind of gases might be in the atmosphere, see what temperatures it might be based on how far it is. Could it support life? We have found now thousands of planets that are habitable. You call it the Goldilocks zone, if you've heard that term. Still no signs of life. So with all that, it wasn't a negative. I'm like, wow, we're really small. Really damn special. And that was the feeling. I was like, man, it's like really cool to have this perspective to see it for myself, not to hear somebody say it. We've looked for life all over the place, and we ain't found it yet. But we know where it is. And so I think it's a reminder to us to respect it. Like, let's take care of this planet that takes care of us, and let's take care of each other, because this is special. Yeah, great question. Sierra, like the mountains.
Good afternoon. My name is Evan Kears, and I don't have a question. I just wanted to personally come up here and thank you for coming today, sharing your experiences. And today was the first. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Oh, I just want to say today was the first time I actually felt human, so I wanted to thank you for that as well.
Okay. A small token of appreciation. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. I'm here for all of that, by the way. That's why I'm here.
That's right. Okay, I have a question that came in from Knock AD in Lakehurst, New Jersey. This one reverts back to your call sign. It says, did you often or ever get a wave off during a carrier landing and have to do a fly around before you could land? Or as your call sign, Ike states, did you know everything and always get it right the first time and every time?
Yeah, okay, so this person, let me explain to you something about call signs, okay, how call signs work. The guy with no hair, we call him Curly. The short guy might be Stretch, okay? You don't get a call sign like Ike for actually knowing. Yeah. So let's just set that bar. There were times where I had my hook down, tried to land, and was a little too high, too much power, and went around. I don't think I ever got, maybe the training command, I probably got one of them ugly wave off, and while I was learning to do it, honestly, it was so fast, I don't remember that period of my life. I remember when we got to the boat and the instructor dropped us off, and then when I was sitting on the deck of the carrier, and the LSO comes up and says, congratulations, you're a qual. Everything between was a blur. In my fleet experience, I have missed, though. I had wanted to land and missed. We call that a bolter. And and you go around again and you get to metabolize all that emotion, and you still have to land on the boat, though. The most challenging thing you have to do is still ahead of you. That is such great training. Like, I own that. I told you all the fun stuff. I wish I could. We would never leave though. If I told you all the ugly, in between, prickly stuff, but that stuff is all special to me because going around a carrier and still having this really important thing ahead of me was the first super tangible thing to get me ready for a spacewalk. When you leave and go out into the vacuum of space, hundreds of degree temperature swings, no air, your liquids would become fluids and you would die slowly, and when you scream, no one could hear you because there's no air anyway. It's a harsh environment. The only thing you have to do after you go out is get back in. All that science and mechanics in between is bonus. So getting back in is the most important thing you're going to do on a spacewalk is ahead of you. Sometimes for 10 hours. And then you have to be your best at the 10-hour point in that suit. And so that was really helpful for me, right? Owning that, yeah, man, I messed up a lot. Thankfully, I lived to try again. Absolutely. Oh, several times. Several, yes.
Any other questions so far?
We have one right here. What's your name? Katarina asked me, how has my wife supported me? What's the one big thing she's done for me through all of this? I don't have a favorite child. I don't have a favorite experience in space, a favorite moment in space. And I can't tell you the one biggest thing. She's been my ride or die since. And without that lady from way back then to now, so many things could have gone so differently. Let me just tell you a story. I was at work. I was a department head. And I don't know, some of you might relate to this. I was department head. I was running the squadron, man. And the CO and XO are the authority, though. But us department heads, we run the squadron. And you know, you might know it too. You might think I can run this squadron, even if they weren't here, you know. And I think that little bit of ego was talking to me. And I was getting frustrated with something. I was frustrated with my job. Being a department head is a really challenging job, but a good job. And I wanted to be a CO. And I had to watch so many of our young folks, and it happened to be mostly Filipino, Hispanic, and black sailors get processed out of the Navy. Now I'm in Japan, okay? That's a big dang deal. If the Navy just went through all that stuff to get you over there to be able to be in Japan, forward deployed naval forces, sending you home was a big deal. And this happened enough times, and you know, we talked about it as department heads. We had to often do the paperwork that the CO or CAG would sign. And I came home one day, and it had been one of them days where, like, I think I know better than the skipper, and the skipper and the XO know better, and they have the authority to tell me what to do and how to do my job. And I came home and I told my wife, when this tour is up, I'm getting out. I'm done. She said, why? I was like, well, I want to be a CO. But I don't know if I'm going to survive this tour. Like, we bump heads a lot. And I'm frustrated. But I said, the real big thing is, I'm tired of watching these young people get kicked out. I want to go back home, and I want to work with this community and just put all my effort into helping. And she had known the whole time about these different sailors that we were adding and separating. And she says, you know, okay, we can do that. But she's like, you could also just take care of that right now. You know, those sailors show up, and when they're new, you could grab them in and just work with them one by one and keep this from happening. I don't have time to tell you this whole story. When I checked out of that squadron to go to DC, the chief's mess came up to the ready room, called the maintenance master chief, and brought in everybody that could fit in our ready room. And our chief's mess gave me this coin that sits, it's the middle, got a lot of little wards and trinkets, man. This is the middle. This is the most important. I've never been given something like this to this day. They gave me this big old coin. And the ceremony, they made me an honorary chief for working with those sailors. And that idea came from that conversation with my wife. That's cool, like what happened, what it did professionally. But if my wife hadn't said what she said to me in my living room in Japan, I wouldn't be in the Navy right now. And it isn't about I wouldn't have become an astronaut. I just don't know where I would be. But I definitely wouldn't be here. And so it's not one thing. I mean, I've checked in with her Because you still are we. When I was at China Lake was the first time I could get out of the Navy, and I told some of the VX-31 folks, like one of my mentors told me a long time ago, look at whatever option, even if you know what you're doing, always analyze the other one, but put some data to it. And so I sent out resumes, interviewed, and I had some, pay compensation comparison. And I knew I was staying in. I was going to take the bonus and be a department head, but now I had data, and we made that decision together. I'm like, hey, baby, I can get out. This is the first time we can go do something else. And I've got connections. I can go do a couple different things here. And she was like, no, we had just had our 4th kid here, Ridgecrest Community Hospital. And she was like, no, these babies are expensive. And we've got great health care. No, but we've loved this, actually. We've loved this. And we knew then we had started floating the idea of going to Japan for our department head tour so that our kids could live overseas. And so, I mean, she's just been an active part of this with me. And that's been why I think I've been able to do some of the really amazing things that I don't deserve to do, is because we've had this team. My favorite job on and off the planet is not being an astronaut, it's being a dad. She made that possible. I was trying to help with homework from the space station. Didn't work, but I tried. But it's because we're a team. So she's been my teammate. Maybe that's the answer. But there isn't that one thing. It's all of them. It's integration, math. You know how we add up the area under a curve in mathematics? It's easy when they're straight lines. When they're curves, we do this thing called integrating. You remember learning this in calculus? What are you actually doing when you integrate? It's adding. You add small bits. That's it. It's been the small things over the long time. That's what she's done, what we've done together. Great question. Thank you.
Love it. That was awesome. Do we have a question over there?
An overarching theme of your talk and my experiences finding I think one of the things that we should do very key is that the community to drive innovation and problem solving. Do you have any experiences in China Lake or DSN that elsewhere as well?
Oh, use it elsewhere. I feel like I was a part of a really interesting community, and like what I was assigned to do. I was taken from the squadron and put into this IPT that was supposed to go out and make sure the Navy got its money's worth, right? But how we did it, I don't see him. But one of my teammates in doing that, we got to run our program the way we thought, and it meant evaluating things that maybe the Navy wasn't even asking, like the workload. What is this going to require from a 27-year-old Nugget pilot in combat that's considering also being shot back at, And so we did some things, I think, with the technology that were maybe above and beyond what we were expected to do, but we had a supportive network that was doing that together. And so I felt like we were using our community and using that to drive the technology that the Navy was acquiring. And I told earlier that same team that I was a part of, that's the gentleman, the guy who ran that team was the gentleman who also decided he was going to fund my graduate education. You know what I mean? I felt like, so when I was here, I very much felt like we were a community. Yeah, and that same group, one of the coolest things I think we've ever done is developing the LOCO, the low collateral damage bomb. That happened before my time. But when I was here, we got to do something that was kind of cool, kind of like that. And we developed this capability pretty quickly. And then we actually got to take it, us, the folks from Top Gun, maintenance folks, and with some initial tactics and logistics recommendations, and deliver it. And we flew to Al-Assad, Iraq, and gave it to them. And I think that is an outgrowth of this really small, but really innovative, really powerful community that we had here. The weapons team was, I was really happy to be planted where I was. I felt like we did amazing work. And that's why, when I was telling these green suit guys and gals, this is the best job I've ever had, that's why. That is a huge part of it, is that sense of community. But with that, though, not just community for community's sake, like that community that had a really clear, distinct purpose. What do we do here? We're curing cancer. Knowing your mission is super important too. So community and purpose. But I felt that way. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, if that's what you mean. I felt that way while I was here. Have I answered your question a little bit? Yeah. Well,
A little louder.
what did I do to take that experience, that feeling, and import it everywhere, export it everywhere if it didn't exist? Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. You know, the astronaut office is one of the most interesting places I've ever worked. When I showed up, I kept comparing it to the Navy in general, big Navy, and that was kind of making me miserable. Comparisons are not a good thing, right? And I try hard not to do that now, but I was. But one interesting thing, it's still interesting to me. I was never able to go somewhere. At the time when I first asked this question, Kate Rubins was in space. She was the newest person to go to space. And I was like, where can I go and just like touch the name tag of Al Shepard, the first American in space, and just look at the name patches all the way up to Kate Rubins? Where is that? Because that's my tribe. That's us. Team Human Spaceflight America. And it didn't exist. And so, you know, we have this thing here. I'm used to in naval aviation, from carrier aviation, we have this thing called the ready room, where the pilots would sit when they'd be ready to go up to the flight deck and jump into planes and go. So the astronaut office didn't have a space for us to just be together. And I was like, that's probably important. And so we agreed to create a space. And so we have a ready room, a place where we can sit and talk about the things we don't talk about in public. There's a lot to this job that's icky and stinky and not fun. And yeah, I got to poke you and you got to poke me. And we talk about that in private with each other. And this is a space that facilitates that. That was one physical manifestation of this culture, some of the culture work we needed. Now our office is actually doing some really intentional cultural development work where I think we're making sure that our mission and our objectives align, and that no matter what all that is, that we are also here for one another, which can be challenging, the way that this job, the visibility of this job, the risk associated with the job, it's got these really interesting facets that can create division if you're not intentionally guarding against those things. And so I would say I'm actively doing that right now. And how? Like, I mean, in every way, like from on a personal level, sharing my experience. I've tried to get out of the giving advice business, and I did some today. And I apologize. Really, what I'm trying to do is share. I want my life to be a case study. Take this, it's free. It's already in the record. But if you pull pieces of that, analysis and synthesis, whether you're an engineer or a scientist, like break it down into simple pieces, build simple pieces into elegant solutions. You can take something and use it. And so sharing with our new folks, that's a part of it. I'm also a part of our leadership. I am also trying to codify some of this in policy. This is how we will do business. I'm also trying to dismantle unwritten rules. And live up to the written standards that we have. Yeah, that's a long discussion right there. If I can just successfully do that, there is a secret grading system that exists sometimes that you don't know is being levied against you. If I can get that gone, and we are evaluating everybody on the actual standards that we've all agreed to, it's really interesting. But going to space, people think that is the most interesting part of this career because it's very visible. But what I was doing for those 6 months pales in comparison to what I get to do now. The honor I have now, my impact on human spaceflight is much greater with my feet on the ground. And what I'm doing for the future of this office is much more important to me than the 6 months I got to be in space. That is incredibly special, and I'm glad I got to do it. It opens the doors for some of these things that I'm doing now. But what I'm doing now, this will have lasting effect on the office. Just like what Al Shepard and John Young and John Glenn did in the office have had an impact on what we're doing now. This will have an impact on what the astronaut office looks like in the future, our position within NASA, and how we show up for humanity, what we do, what our mission to the world is. And so yeah, this is an ongoing thing that we are doing right now. Yeah, thank you. Great question.
Awesome. Phil? Go ahead and take over.
Wrap up, excuse me, sorry about that. Really loud. We're going to wrap up. Victor, thank you so much for coming out. We have one more video to play with closing remarks by Mr. John Myers.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Myers, Executive Director at the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division, also known as NOC-TSD, here in Orlando, Florida. I'm also one of your NAVAIR African American Pipeline Action Team, or APAT, Executive Champions. I'm extremely grateful to be included in this wonderful event today. Captain Glover, thank you so much for sharing your story. Here in the NAVAIR community, we all know that naval officers make the best aviators and astronauts. Especially for those of us who live in Central Florida, space flight is a big deal. Although NOC-TSD does not have a runway on our base like our sister NAVAIR sites who get to enjoy seeing aircraft fly by nearly every day, what you may not realize is NOC-TSD is only 36 miles from Kennedy Space Center Launch Pad 39A. I would venture to say we may be the only NAVAIR command that gets to enjoy watching rockets carrying astronauts fly by and soar up into space. There is no doubt that around this ecosystem, astronauts are superstars, and we are honored to have this opportunity to spend time with you today. Inclusive diversity is essential to our success. Events like these are truly an investment in our collective NAVAIR team. I'm sure you can agree that our teammates are NAVAIR's most valuable assets. All of our teammates are important, and that is why our diversity action teams are so essential to NAVAIR, because they help provide a voice for our teammates and a mechanism to shape our future. With potential global threats focused upon us, our nation needs to be strong and unified. This means we as a NAVAIR team need to be strong and unified. Since we all come from diverse backgrounds, it is important that we don't just assume everyone understands the barriers and obstacles our teammates face. Diverse action teams are an extremely important investment, and I strongly encourage all members of NAVAIR to consider joining and actively supporting one of these teams in whatever NAVAIR location you are in. Diversity of culture, background, and thought strengthens us all. It's a proven fact that a diverse workforce leads to better productivity and a better environment where people look forward to contributing to something greater than themselves. Outside of the workplace, diversity leads to better connected communities filled with vibrant relationships between all members. For diversity to reach its full potential as a force multiplier, there needs to be inclusion. Inclusion is ensuring everyone has an opportunity to be heard and encouraging people to be comfortable to take advantage of those opportunities. That's the key to being a strong leader, advocate, and a productive, thoughtful teammate. This year's theme is inspiring change, and each of us has the power to do just that. Every effort, large and small, makes a difference. We have it within us to continue to evolve and improve the tapestry of our nation, both here on the ground and into the stars like Captain Glover. It all starts here with you. Thank you again, Captain Glover, and I thank all of you for taking the time today to learn and grow so we can all make a difference and inspire change.
Hey, I know we went over. Thank you. I love talking about space. There's clearly a lot more to this than just space. Space is a great tool to get into talking about what we do for humanity, and I really take this opportunity seriously. All these talks to me are super important, and your time is also very important to me. So thank you for staying over a little bit. I think what we were talking about is great. It's very important, and I'll stick around and hang out if we have a few more questions too. But thank you for your time. Please give yourself a round of applause.
Yeah, one more round of applause for him. Encourage you all to stick around. Thanks so much for coming. And I know he mentioned he's got family on the way or in the vicinity too. So thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.